I've told you this before. I know you're aware, but I have zero social media accounts. I have no social media presence whatsoever. I deleted Facebook long ago. It's never on Instagram. A Twitter account I had for a while, rarely used it before finally making it official and deleting it for a variety of reasons. Reddit was probably the last one I was holding on to before admitting to myself this is still social media and I needed to get rid of it. And I won't go through a huge spiel of why I don't have social media accounts, but one of the major reasons was just how much I could feel it like affecting me. Like when I'm not on social media, I'm thinking about a dumb comment I saw and thinking of a response and getting angry. And I'm like, why? None of this matters. Is none of people are affecting my life too much. I just need to fully delete it. And I've been happier since. I have no regrets and never been at all tempted to go back. But I do often think like plenty of other people are able to have social media accounts and engage with people on this level, and they're not angry people, and they engage in a healthy way, and it doesn't affect the rest of their life. So is social media really the problem, or should I rather be working on myself and my own social tools? Like, is deleting my accounts more just overkill? Should I be looking inward, do you think?
Yeah, deleting the accounts just means you're a coward. So, there are people who are capable of completely and utterly disconnecting from whatever's on the internet. Their presence on the internet does not remove their ability to disengage from it. There are people who can just do that, it turns out. I like, without even necessarily like intention, I definitely realize that I engage with it less. Like, I have read it, but I just kind of like mindlessly read it now. I don't really like, I have reached the point where like I'll start typing something and I'm just kind of like, nah, what's the point? Like, you know, especially like if it's something like mildly critical or like being like, well, actually, it's like, nobody cares. Like, I've kind of reached that point with social media where like anytime I think of saying anything, I'm just kind of like, this doesn't matter. But yeah.
Men will literally record a movie podcast to avoid going to therapy. Theme song.
We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I'm joined as always by my deadly weapon co-host, Andrew Williams. Say something to the listeners, Andrew.
Hello.
Each week, we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Nic Cage month. And this week, we are talking the 1997 film, Con Air. I'm excited, Andrew. I'm excited for this month, for this week. Talk about these movies, but got to start here. What's your history with this one, Con Air, Andrew? Did you maybe catch it in theaters in 1997, or was this more like a cable TV classic?
This is a cable TV thing. I definitely didn't see this when it came out. This was, I mean, we'll talk about it more, but I was 10. I was about to turn 10 when this movie came out, so wasn't really on the radar of my parents to take me to go see Con Air. I definitely remember my dad.
It's good parenting right there.
Yeah, I remember my dad mentioning it, and like I remember seeing it like on video and stuff. And I remember Dogma had a reference to it, and I didn't understand what it meant because I hadn't seen it.
You're old enough to see and understand Dogma, but not old enough to dive into Con Air.
Dogma was a couple years later. But
I was 13. I could handle it.
I was 13 by then, but yeah, definitely went back to it later. Obviously, just it's as part of the Cage pantheon. It's kind of often highlighted as one of the high points, one of the best of the best when it comes to kind of unbridled Cage in a good way. And yeah, so went back to it. one of my favorite of Cage's. It's just a blast. We'll obviously talk tons more about it in the next little bit, but yeah, this is definitely something that once I did get around to watching it, I was like, this is no notes, guys.
It's one that I was familiar with kind of growing up, but as you said, we were 10 or 11. I'm not sitting down and watching this beginning to end, but it's a pretty big hit. It's just in the pantheon. You see it at the movie store. It's on cable TV all the time. So I saw bits and pieces of it, but I definitely saw it back in the day, and I've revisited it there's been long gaps between viewings, but, I maybe watched it 10, 15 years ago, like, oh, look at this ridiculous action movie, almost kind of watching it as a quote-unquote bad movie to enjoy.
Yeah.
And then sit down and watch it now for the podcast, and I'm with you, not to spoil, show our hand so early in the episode, but I love this movie. And I think maybe at times I watched it and thought I was smarter than the movie, and I was looking down on it and laughing at it. But watching it now, I think they made exactly the movie they wanted. I think they wanted this tone, and like I'm engaging with it on a more genuine level. Looking back and watching it now, we'll get into all that. We'll talk about the positives and all the performances, and man, there's some excellent performances in this movie. It's gonna be a fun month, Cage month. We've put together this month with the help of you, our dear listeners. If you haven't already, please join us in the Discord. We threw it out to you. What movies should we be looking at during Cage month? You had a lot of recommendations, more than we can cover in 1 month, but I think we've sort of filed it down to there's going to be 5 episodes this month. There's 5 Tuesdays in April, and we're hitting kind of different eras of Nicolas Cage. So I think you're going to enjoy the ride and the variety. And if you want to see what that entire lineup is, head into our Discord. We can talk about it there. There's a link in the show notes. Come and join us. What are you waiting for? But set the stage here for this movie, Con Air. It's released June 6th, 1997. It's made on a budget of $75 million. At the box office, it brings in $224 million. Pretty good hit for the day. Critically, mixed reception. It holds a 58% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. So it's not panned by critics, but it's not a critical darling. It's not an Oscar play. It's just a good old blockbuster like we used to have, Andrew?
Yeah, we used to be a proper country. I understand. We used to make movies like Con Air. But yeah, it kind of reminds me, what was The Rock's critical response? That's the year before this. And yeah, 67. So I feel like I always kind of view these similarly. Obviously, The Rock gets some added gravitas from that, whoever that old guy was. But Con Air has always been like, it feels like a movie that, I described it to you before the show, and I was kind of going to wait to say this later, but like, it feels like it's the ultimate example of a movie where everyone understands the assignment.
Yes. Everyone
is on the same page. Everybody gets it. We'll talk more about that, obviously, but like, the critical response, like you said, 58%. Off not it's 71, so a little bit smaller pool than we're usually used to. But obviously the audience score 75%. That's much higher. A little low, honestly, if you asking for my genuine opinion. I'm going to push that up into the 80s, folks. Let's get 4 out of 5 here before the 3 out of 4 right now just ain't cutting it for me. But otherwise, yeah, it feels like it's a movie that, I wouldn't say there's been a reevaluation, because I think everybody's kind of been on the same page from day one as far as this movie goes.
Let's take a look at the creative team. It is written by Scott Rosenberg. Just one credited writer on this film. Kind of rare, especially for blockbusters. Now, before this, he had written the movies Things to Do, In Denver, When You're Dead, and Beautiful Girls, movies that I admit I'm not familiar with, but this man has a very long and fruitful career in the industry. After this, writes Disturbing Behavior. You remember that one with little Cyclops there?
I know it exists.
One of the worst movie posters I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
Hashtag PP, horrible. But I hate that poster.
Well, like,
they kept it
poorly photoshopped, but like everybody's like, they upped the saturation on everybody.
Yes.
So like 200%.
Some reason one person's like way in the foreground, half cut off. They use that same image like every DVD and Blu-ray release. Like they really loved it and stuck with it. Anyway, also writes High Fidelity, Gone in 60 Seconds. Maybe we'll revisit that. Who knows? Kangaroo Jack kind of bounces back eventually with Jumanji: The Next Level, an action movie that I really, really enjoy. But highs and lows in the career, but steadily working. Does a lot of uncredited rewrites. Real, just a Hollywood writer through and through.
Alum of the show. Didn't we do the first Venom?
Yes, we did. Yeah. So we've talked about him before.
He was one of 3 writers on the first Venom film, but alum of the show. You mentioned he wrote Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, or the 2017 Jumanji. They subtitled it Welcome to the Jungle later because it turns out having 2 movies in a franchise with the same name is confusing. Looking at you, Halloween. But 3 movies with the same name, guys. They called it Welcome to the Jungle. Also wrote Jumanji: The Next Level. Both just really fun action movies. I actually enjoyed both of those quite a bit. Obviously has a Venom credit in there as well. Did a Christmas film called Dashing Through the Snow that I'm completely unfamiliar with, starring Lil Ray Howery. So might need to look that up. But then, like you said, tons of uncredited revisions. Also on 90s, late 90s action blockbusters like Armageddon, General's Daughter, Domestic Disturbance, the weird John Travolta, Vince Vaughn psychological thriller. Has an uncredited rewrite on Spider-Man. So lots of stuff there, as well as apparently lots of unproduced screenplays as well. And so lots, like you said, just been out there doing his thing. It looks like at a certain point, Jeff Pinkner, who he works with on Venom and Jumanji, became kind of his writing partner, so they have a lot of credits together on the later stuff. But yeah, I was quite surprised looking at his filmography. Just a lot of stuff I didn't remember he wrote Venom, but lots of other fun stuff mixed in there. I guess I'm gonna have to watch The General's Daughter. I've just been seeing it pop up. Like, last week was Battlefield Earth, and obviously with all the Travolta dives I did there, and then it came up in conversation here multiple times. It's the film the director does after Con Air. So I think I'm about to do a Travolta month myself. Not for you folks, but for myself, it's going to be a Travolta month. So we will see.
Speaking of alums of the show, Andrew, the movie is directed by Simon West. We talked about him previously when we covered Lara Croft Tomb Raider, which he directs a few years after this, also a writer on that movie. But this is his directorial debut, which is genuinely incredible.
What a home run. Genuinely. Yes. Like you, I'm not saying this movie is Citizen Kane, but you basically Citizen Kane yourself. There's nowhere to go but down.
Hashtag PP. I think this is the highlight.
There's nowhere to go but down. There's just nowhere to go. It is. But
wild. Look, he directs The Mechanic with Jason Statham. He reteams with Nicolas Cage for Stolen. I mean, he steadily works. Still has movies coming out. Lots of action movies that you may or may not have heard of. But honestly, before he does Con Air, before he even becomes a film director, he directs music videos, and he directs Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley. He does the music video for that. All those shots of Rick Astley doing I'm doing it. I don't know how to describe it, but his little hand shuffle to the left and to the right. This man is the man behind the camera. I probably made this exact same observation when we covered him on Lara Croft Tomb Raider, but it's worth repeating. This man has always had an eye for talent.
And that was 10 years before this, though. A very interesting career there. Yeah, and like you said, still working today. A little bit more on the what we'd call direct-to-streaming side. It looks a little bit these days. But a lot of stuff, to be fair, is direct-to-streaming these days. Sure. But I do want to shout out, he does direct The Expendables 2, which I don't know if this is considered controversial or not. But
is that
The
the good one?
Expendables 2 is the best of all the Expendables movies.
Okay, all right.
It is genuinely good, I think. It is the first one, like, so you're going to hear me talk about the Expendables for a second, folks. I'm sorry. But the first one is kind of like, it never reaches for anything, which
Yes.
the movie has its selling point. All these old guys are teaming up and you're seeing them all together and it's fun. Like, that's all the first one. So the first one never strives for anything more. It doesn't really even bother to tell like a particularly interesting story. It's just like, hey, all these guys are here. That's cool. And it never really reaches beyond that. Expendables 2, I actually think takes that step to be like, let's actually make this entertaining as we can, and let's make this story have a little bit more punch. So this is the one where Jean-Claude Van Damme plays the villain. He who literally plays a villain named Vallon. But didn't some things didn't reach far, folks. They can't all be winners. But so that's cool. It creates this story where Liam Hemsworth is this new kid that's kind of with the team, and he gets killed by Jean-Claude Van Damme, and it kicks off this revenge story, and you get a bunch of guys back. It's genuinely really fun, and it's definitely the best of these. Liam Hemsworth told this really funny story about Jean-Claude Van Damme when they were making this movie, where Jean-Claude Van Damme, apparently when they were shooting a scene, because at a certain point, the way Jean-Claude Van Damme kills him, which just happens in the first, 15 minutes, he kicks a knife at his chest and stabs him through the chest. Like, kicks the knife in the air, through the air, into the man's chest. And I'm like, that's dope. That's
And
exactly how I'd want Joe.
How did
Go
it
ahead.
take so long in Jean-Claude Van Damme's career for that to happen? Like, how was that
Exactly.
not
Like,
his
why-
third movie?
Yeah, like, how did it take so long to get there? Because I guess people were like, the kicks are what's dangerous. But at one point, Jean-Claude Van Damme was apparently looking at Liam Hemsworth and just went, "You have a nice face," and just walked away. And Liam Hemsworth was like, "What?" But they were shooting a scene where Jean-Claude Van Damme kicks him in the chest. And they're shooting the scene, they're prepping, and the whole thing is it's not an actual kick. It's not an actual kick. And they finally say action. They're going for the shot. And Jean-Claude Van Damme whips around and just full on kicks Liam Hemsworth in the chest, full force. Liam Hemsworth falls to his knees like he's supposed to, and literally goes, "Oh God!" Just the man just got kicked in the chest by Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Jean-Claude Van Damme walks up and goes, "Don't worry, it's a controlled kick," and then walks away. And Liam Hemsworth is like, "No, it wasn't. You just kicked me in the chest. This wasn't even close to controlled." But anyway, apparently Jean-Claude Van Damme, a little bit of a weird guy, but I would suspect nothing less. But anyway, just thought it was cool
Somehow,
that you did that.
Despite being Stallone fan number one, I've only seen the first Expendables. I've maybe seen clips of other ones, but there's 4 of them. I know this.
Yes,
Haven't
there are.
watched them all. I feel like
I don't know that I would suggest that you do.
Andrew, I have to. I have. Although I've said this before, I do want to be able to say I've seen every single Stallone movie, but every single time I look at his filmography, I'm like, I find 2 movies I've never heard of before. I'm like, God, this man has made so many movies, and I know the average quality is not going to be too high, but I got a soft spot for the guy.
Why do this when I could just go rewatch Copland?
Oh man. Why are we talking about this? Where were we, Andrew?
Simon West directed Expendables 2.
There
That's
it is.
why. I just wanted to talk about it. Expendables 2 is good, not as good as Con Air.
I want to talk more about him as a director and his work on this movie, and I think we're gonna do exactly that when we jump into the film. So let's just move on with it, Andrew. Let's move on to the next part of this podcast. We are gonna talk about the scenes of this movie, our favorite scenes, our favorite performances, all the positives about Con Air. Andrew, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
After Army Ranger Cameron Poe is sent to prison for killing a man in self-defense, he must wait 8 years before getting the opportunity to reunite with his wife and meet his daughter for the first time. But while being transported to freedom, the other convicts on the plane hijack the aircraft. Now Poe must use his army training to try and thwart the inmates' plan from aboard the runaway airplane. And that's it, Andrew. It's a pretty simple premise. And for a movie with a simple premise and for, I don't know, 75% taking place in one location, this is a deep cast. Like, there's a lot of people we're going to need to talk about here. It's incredible how many characters and actors they jam into here and how many end up being, like, pretty significant or memorable.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, but I like somebody else would show up and I was like, geez, good Lord. Like, who else is it? It turned into Wayne's World 2. Man, who else?
Well, let's just do it, Andrew. Let's talk about the cast of this movie. And of course, we're going to start with the high point, best casting and best performance of the film, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the call of duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off. Who is getting a Mark Strong Award for Con Air? But let me pause you. I know I just asked you a question. Let me pause you. And let me just say, for me personally, this is pretty tough. It's a deep cast, a lot of good performances. I don't know where you're going to go with it. And I can't rely on my usual, well, he's probably going to give it to the villain, because everyone's a villain. It's all bad guys. It's all convicts. So I wait with bated breath, Andrew. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award?
This is the tough one because like you said, there's a lot of people, like you said, I described this movie very much as something where everybody understands the assignment. And I do mean that. I think almost everybody in this movie, outside maybe one or two of the bit character actor parts, like everybody gets it. And but that means that everybody is playing their roles exactly as they need to be, which means that everybody kind of ends up being part of the secret sauce in a way. So obviously going in about a half hour in, I was like, I know who this is. It's gotta go with my heart. But as the movie goes on, I think I had to go a certain way, and I will definitely give the other people their flowers as we talk about them. But in a shock move for some, in a movie full of villains, I am giving it to the only hero, Nicolas Cage.
Wow.
As Cameron Poe.
Wow. Who's still a convicted felon, let's be clear here.
We all know that in any world, really, Nic Cage is not going to jail for what happened at the beginning of this movie, folks. Everybody knows that. Not just is it 100% self-defense. He's a white veteran, guys. He's not going to jail.
In a movie full of insane characters and over-the-top action, the most unbelievable thing happened in the first 10 minutes when he gets sent to like an extensive prison sentence,
like 8
for
years.
Defending his wife in self-defense. He wasn't the aggressor, and like everyone knows that's what happened. Like, it's not some conspiracy where he looks like the bad guy. Like, everyone's like, yeah, it was self-defense. Like, it's so wild. Andrew, I'm a little surprised by this though. You're going with the white meat baby face, as it were. Tell me, was there a specific moment in the movie where you're like, well, I got to give it to Cage, or was it just kind of over time?
He just keeps there's a point where I'll just tell you outright. John Malkovich is obviously the other one that was in the running, the big one, and we'll talk about him more almost assuredly soon, I'm sure. But
very soon.
There's a point where Cage, I think, starts getting a little bit more to do than Malkovich does. Like, there's a point in the movie where they're kind of crashed, and Cage is still caging around, while Malkovich is kind of in the background at that point. And that's where the race kind of split for me. Like, when we go back to Malkovich, there'd be a cool line, but at this point, Cage is pulled ahead, and Malkovich was not able to catch up. Which I'm sure you'll disagree with shortly. But ultimately, like, the way he plays this character, the deadpan way he responds to stuff, like the ridiculous accent, whatever that's supposed to be, it's all just like the quips. Like, it truly is a movie where, like, if this could have been made in the 80s starring Arnold, and it wouldn't have seemed strange. Like, the way the character, if that character is Arnold, and you play it 10 years before.
And Arnold, and he's still from Mobile, Alabama, and Arnold is trying to do the Southern accent. Yeah, that's
talks
what
like Arnold. Like, It's kind of like what is the John Woo Hard Target with Jean-Claude Van Damme, where he's the New Orleans man that sounds like he's from Belgium. But
Yeah, or when he plays Guile in Street Fighter, the All-American Guile.
The
He's got
All-American
an American flag
the white
tattoo on his
baby
bicep,
face.
and he can't
They're
understand
literally played
anything
by
he
a Belgian
says.
man. But oh man, but yeah, definitely. Like this script almost could have been made 10 years earlier, completely unchanged, and who would it have been as good? I don't know. But my point is saying that, like, all the quips, all the deadpan, all of that is something that you could easily see like an 80s peak of his career action star doing. But the way he plays it here with the accent and like the ones that kind of stick out to me, like when they release Steve Buscemi's character and he's just sitting next to him and he has this conversation with the guy and he turns over and looks at him and he goes, "Hi, Garland." Like just straight up acknowledges his presence, says hello to him, and then just moves on. Like there's just all these moments where he tells him to fix the landing gear and he's like, "Oh, that'll be a great view," and just kind of looks at him all crazy and he goes, "Trees and stuff." Like just the way he gives these deliveries are just so perfect. And like I love when he's talking to John Cusack at one point. And John Cusack's character is like, "If you can't trust a South American drug lord, who can you trust?" And Poe is just sitting there in silence, and John Cusack is like, "That was a joke." And again, he just deadpans, "I'm glad you told me." Like, and then just moves on to the next
It's
thing.
very good.
Like, it's just the way he plays this character. Obviously, he gets the most to work with because he is just, obviously, he's the star of the movie. But I just, at a certain point, he pulled ahead for me, and I was like, can't go back. I can't go back. So I'm kicking off Cage Month in the best way possible by giving the man himself, not his first one, no way to check, but I assume he had to have gotten one for one of the Ghost Riders. But
Almost assuredly not his first one.
at least for
but,
the second one. I think the second one he definitely at least got one. But
well,
no way to check.
no way to know. No way to check. No way to know.
No way to check. But so I'm kicking off Cage Month by making him a multi-time asterisk.
Probably
Award winner, possible, probably two multiple time, definitely, possibly even more than two. We've talked about him before.
Someone will tell us.
Someone will tell us. But anyway,
this is a great pick. How could I be mad at this? I love this performance. I got no bones with this at all. One thing I was struck by, and this isn't at all a negative, just an observation, is that I don't think this is like the quintessential Cage performance. Like if I was trying to show someone a movie that's like, this is what makes Nicolas Cage, it wouldn't be Con Air. I mean, is it? I don't know. Maybe by the end of this month, I'll have a good answer on what that singular movie would be.
Folks, it's Face Off. Like I don't know why he's debating this. It's Face Off.
Well, the thing about Face Off is John Travolta gets to play Nicolas Cage for most of the runtime. You know.
It's still Nicolas Cage's performance, man. Don't.
I mean, the fact that Nicolas Cage-isms gets to live in two separate characters, maybe that is a good point. We are not covering Face Off this month. We did consider it, and then we saw that it's like
guys.
It's a huge hit, which I knew, but it has like a 90-something% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Like I can't believe how well received that movie was. I mean, I can because it's awesome. But
this movie's also awesome, and
we can only
critical response. So
yes, we can only bend our own rules that we make up so far. But there is a moment in that movie where Nicolas Cage, obviously, he's the good guy. He's the John Travolta character, but he's in Nicolas Cage's body, or however you want to word that. You know what I'm saying. But he's in prison, and he realizes that to convince his brother that he's actually his brother, he has to act like Castor Troy. He has to act like the Nicolas Cage character. So Nicolas Cage, who looks like Nicolas Cage, has to start acting like Nicolas Cage. And there's a scene where his eyes get real wide and you see him like snap into character. That might be peak Nick Cage. So fair enough point. But here in this movie, we never have that one scene. That like the bathroom scene from Mandy, that prison scene from Face Off. That
the entire runtime of Wicker Man.
There's a lot of examples we could point out, and I'm sure we will all month. But he never becomes like unhinged. He shows a lot of lot of restraint. I mean, it's still an over the top performance by most actors' standards, but he's alongside a bunch of other people that are overacting in a good way. It's a charm of the movie, and I'm more kind of impressed by his restraint and his quips. And it's incredible that all of it is through the filter of this, again, Mobile, Alabama accent. I can't speak on whether or not that's an accurate accent. Like, it's clear what he's going for, but is that really how people sound from Mobile? I don't know, but it is consistent. And I got to give the movie huge props for using this deep Southern accent and not using it as shorthand for this guy is dumb. Because that is such a huge trope in movies that is complete horse. Because being from a certain region of the country doesn't make you less intelligent. Like, I feel like it's silly to even say that out loud. But that is a huge assumption in society because of movies and TV. And I don't know, maybe from Texas, I feel a little bit more passionately about this than other people might. But in a movie full of, like, you know, tropes and stereotypes and all kinds of stuff, that's not one that they choose to use. And I was actually a little impressed by that. So huge ups for that. I love the performance. I don't know at what point this month I should say this, but Andrew, isn't it incredible that Nic Cage, gonzo, weirdo actor, no one like him, Nic Cage, was at one point the biggest action star in Hollywood, or one of them? Like, nothing about this man screams action star.
Con Air, The Rock,
Face Off,
and Face Off all come out pretty close together. Like, it's pretty, like, I want to actually look, because it's The Rock. He literally does The Rock, Con Air, and Face Off in a row.
Wild.
Like,
wild.
Insane. Like, The Rock, Con Air, and Face Off. That's like, yeah, like, you can't do much better than that. And he's got Leaving Las Vegas before The Rock, which Leaving Las Vegas isn't really action, but it's very, very good.
He wins the Oscar for that one, right? I famously don't follow these things, but I think he at least gets a Best Actor nom.
He does. Like he actually wins it. He wins
okay.
it. He does win it, which, well deserved. That performance is very, very good. But yeah, so, like, I think it's 95. He also does Kiss of Death. That one seems a little more under the radar. But literally, Leaving Las Vegas, The Rock, Con Air, Face Off in a row is pretty wild. Like, an Academy Award-winning dramatic performance followed by 3 of the biggest action movies of those years is pretty crazy. You mentioned how he's not really being, like, he doesn't get unhinged in this movie, but obviously he's still overacting. And I guess that's kind of what makes me compare it to, like, something of, like, Arnold or Stallone from the 80s, in that, like, it does feel like a performance of theirs. Like, Arnold doesn't really get unhinged, but like I said, he's the easiest comparison here. Where, like, I could have easily seen this movie being made with Arnold, because the way the character is played is just in that vein. There's the quips, there's the dry delivery. Obviously, Nic Cage, to be fair, got pretty shredded for this movie. Definitely looks like he's
like casually jacked. I mean, like, whenever he's like
I don't know,
fully dressed, he looks like a normal dude. Like, but yeah, when he's down to, like, a tank top, it's like, wow. The shots, like, plenty of shots from him from behind. Like, his back is huge. Like, this dude is ripped. And it's always shocking. I remember when we did Ghost Rider. There's one scene where you see him without a shirt on, and the dude is like, again,
he's ripped.
ripped. So, like, you put all that work in for this one scene. You're Ghost Rider. But yeah, he is here. Like, it's just it's impressive.
It is. Anyway, I wanted to shout out that it is very it's just, yeah, I like the performance a lot. It definitely lacked the unhingedness of Cage, some of which I'm sure we'll be talking about later this month. But yeah, here he's kind of keeping it reserved. I guess The Rock is similar in that regard, where, like, I don't know that The Rock really has a moment where he gets unhinged either. Like, I don't know that
Dwayne Johnson gets pretty crazy in the Tooth Fairy. I don't know if
your head up your whole ass, please. Entirely. Complete insertion.
I was really struggling to think of a movie that I could say The Rock gets unhinged, and I don't know if it actually happens.
Because he doesn't. One where he breaks a limb, that's probably the only way he even remotely comes close. But anyway. I
Oh,
think it's an interesting.
and Fast and Furious. Oh gosh, 5 or 6. He breaks his arm. He's in a cast, and then he's got to break out of the cast. He's pretty unhinged there.
He flexes out of the cast in Fast
Yeah.
5.
Is that
That's
5?
when he becomes unhinged.
There it is.
I think it's 5. Maybe it's 6. But
Thanks to the punch up, nailed that joke first try.
First try. Anyway, the point being that I think there's an evolving here. Like, obviously, you get these moments and stuff like Moonstruck or Vampire's Kiss where you see like the energy. But then when he gets these moments of like leaving Las Vegas into The Rock, into Con Air, he's playing it. He's obviously still being Nic Cage. He's obviously still doing the things that he does, but there's no like crazy moments. And that really comes in Face Off, where he just, like you said, he has those moments where like he just goes nuts. And it is, yeah, it's cool. But here, definitely playing it a little more subtle, such as he can in a movie like this. He's subtle in the sense that Arnold's subtle in like The Predator. Like, it's subtle in the sense that like the performance isn't unhinged, but the movie around him is still absolute insanity. So yeah.
Andrew, like I said, it's an excellent pick. I'm sure it won't be Nicolas Cage's last Mark Strong award, but for me, for this movie, for Con Air, I'm gonna be giving my Mark Strong award to someone else, and you know who I'm giving it to. I'm giving it to John Malkovich as Cyrus the Virus, as he is repeatedly referred to like he's a pro wrestler. The treatment of serial killers and convicts in this movie is bonkers, off the wall, and I love it. We'll get to all that. But John Malkovich, man, talk about John Malkovich has a different accent in every single movie he's in, and none of them are real accents. None of them are how a person actually talks in real life. The man's specific enunciating it's as distinct as someone like Christopher Walken, but I don't see too many people out there trying to do their John Malkovich impression. But I love anytime I see this guy. I think we said. Help me out here, Andrew. We talked about John Malkovich before. He's an alum of the show. I know we've discussed him because I think I referred to him as the greatest character actor of all time. If he's not, he's certainly up there. And that I stand by that. I think he is absolutely wonderful. You can drop him into just about anything. Hero, villain, good guy, bad guy, weirdo, Russian mobster, like in Rounders. I think one of his more infamous performances. And he's just always awesome. And you can feed this guy like any line and he will deliver it like no one else can. There's this line, he's threatening the pilot of the plane. And he tells them, he holds a gun up to his head and he's telling them that to radio that everything's fine, everything's normal. And then he says, and if you say a thing about this over the radio, the next wings you will see will belong to the flies buzzing above your corpse. And it's such a mouthful, but he still hits like every single syllable throughout that sentence. And it doesn't sound clunky. I don't know if it sounds menacing, but it's certainly entertaining, which is like the name of the game up and down this whole movie. This guy hits with every single line. I like how callous he is with human lives. It's quite entertaining. All of these guys kind of treat their crimes like scores, like points. And he's like, him and Steve Buscemi, we'll talk about in a moment, are like the top dogs when it comes to like how bad their crimes are. He's a bad guy amongst bad guys. He chews the scenery, but so does everyone else. I gotta give him the nod, Andrew.
Like I said, there's another world where I definitely went this way anyway, instead of going with Nic Cage, and I can't fault this 100% whatsoever. Alum of the show, you are correct. Both Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Jonah Hex. He features in both of those. In Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, he's Homa Kavula, and in Jonah Hex, he plays Quentin Turnbull, who I'm pretty sure is the villain of the whole thing. So probably,
oh my god, man! I
took a Mark Strong on Jonah Hex.
I am feeling this is episode 201, Andrew.
Yep.
I can't picture him in either of those movies you just mentioned. Oh my!
I can picture him in Hitchhiker's Guide because he looks kind of weird, but
well, yeah, it's John Malkovich, but.
Yeah, well, shut up. Jonah Hex, I'd completely, like, you mentioned that we did Tomb Raider, and I was like, did we? Like it was gone.
Hey, you
completely
kind of see
from my
Daniel
brain.
Craig's butt for a second in that movie.
Yeah, like I was just like, we did that? We did? Did we? I don't know, maybe. But anyway, he's perfect in this movie. This was something they talked about, a lot of people being up for this role. He's perfect here, and he's definitely, like, of all the people mentioned, Jason Isaacs, Mickey Rourke, Willem Dafoe, Tom Sizemore. Willem Dafoe is maybe the only other one I think probably would have come close to getting the energy right.
I can see Willem Dafoe in a lot of. I can see him playing Steve Buscemi's part. I can see him being unhinged villain for sure.
Yeah, I could definitely see Willem Dafoe. Bruce Willis apparently turned it down, which I can't see at all, just because I don't know the last time I saw Bruce Willis play a villain.
Yeah, but, you mentioned this before. I think before we started the episode, because I did not see that he turned it down. Has Bruce Willis played a villain?
I'm sure he has.
Right? Like I can picture him playing like a dirty cop, but he's trying to do the right thing. I can picture him as like a damaged person, like in some of his M. Night Shyamalan roles. He's maybe like not 100% good, like Unbreakable. I'm thinking of like he's
still
trying,
like generally speaking
still the hero
side of things. But,
I
would need to look, but I don't know that he has like definitely not played like an outright villain. Like obviously Tom Cruise always has Collateral, which is just a shame because
Collateral
he's amazing.
And Interview with the Vampire, which are like his two best performances arguably of his entire career.
Like the ones where he's like genuinely acting in like a genuinely great way. Not that he doesn't act well in other things, but yeah, it's kind of a bummer that Tom Cruise never does something like Collateral, which if you told me Collateral was your favorite Michael Mann movie, I would tell you to go watch Heat first. And then if you came back and said you still liked Collateral more, I would allow it. But
it's close for me. I mean, I was late coming around to Heat, which we talked about, but man, I really like Collateral.
Collateral might be a tighter movie. Like it's more like it still has quite a scope, but it's still just so good. But Heat is.
Are both of those movies? Don't laugh at me. Are both of those movies L.A.? Those are both
Heat
LA, right?
Is for sure.
Collateral's LA. Because there's like a whole like subway station thing or subway thing. People are like, there's subways in LA, but like there is actually a train.
Yeah,
I think
a lot of Michael Mann stuff ends up inadvertently being in LA.
Well,
not inadvertently. I'm pretty sure it's deliberate.
What's crazy about that is both of those movies have like LA is a character in the movie to be corny, but they both have very different, distinct looks. Like Heat is blue and Collateral is like that gold color, but they both feel so distinct. I think it's just a pretty big accomplishment. But Tom Cruise is incredible in that movie. Yeah,
he's very good. I was trying to remember if Thief took place in LA, and I don't think it does. I think Thief is in Chicago.
Which I just picked up in the most recent Criterion flash sale. They got the 4K out there.
Good.
I've never seen it, so I'm excited to dive in.
James Caan at the peak of his powers. Not quite the peak of his powers. Rollerballs after that. But very, very good. Excellent soundtrack by Tangerine Dream. Excellent. Very, very good. Early on, like wild. Like you'll watch that, and then it's wild to think that Heat is 14 years later. It's wild to realize that he was just at it for that long. But anyway, Thief. Very good. If you don't like it, it might end this show. But
Fair
no
enough.
pressure.
I think Michael Mann, like I haven't seen all of his movies, but I feel like he bats like 500 for me. Like I hope that's not too abrupt. Like the movies I like of his, I
it's
really
probably more
like.
like 2 out of 3, but it's
okay
because there are movies of his that I like, but yeah, he is not. By no means is he like flawless. Like there's definitely stuff he made that I'm just kind of like, okay. Like he made that Hannibal Lecter movie with Brian Cox and the
Manhunter.
I just can't remember the guy who played.
Well, see, I know people. I have not seen that one, but I know people that like that more than Red Dragon.
Sure, but like Brian Cox is just not as iconic as Anthony Hopkins was.
I mean,
it's one of those things.
Be.
Like,
yeah.
It's like, but like people talk about Manhunter, and I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's like. I saw Ferrari. Ferrari was fine. Like I saw
Miami Vice was near unwatchable for me.
There's a director's cut of Miami Vice, and I don't know if it's better. But
Ali, I
he's
couldn't
another guy
really
that like
get-
puts out endless cuts of his movies, but like they're all available. So like you can
Yeah.
just like he's literally like you'll just search like one of his movies and you're like, wait, why are there 4 different director's cuts of this? And it's like because he got bored 2 years ago and decided to recut it again, like because that's just what he does apparently. But
like I said, as long as
yeah.
all the cuts are available, I don't really
Yeah.
mind.
no,
Do-
yeah,
do
but
what you
no,
want.
I'm definitely not gonna say like Black Hat is one that like I bought the Arrow of Black Hat and I watched the theatrical version of it again and I got to the end of it and I was like, cool. Still couldn't tell you what's happening here. I got through the whole movie and was just kind of like, don't get it. So there is a director's cut on that too that I'm hoping to finally watch. But yeah, who has time for any of that? Anyway, we're not talking about Michael Mann. We're talking
No.
about we're talking about Con Air, which is weird. I don't know why we're getting so sidetracked. Con Air is awesome.
But there's a lot to cover. Yeah, there's a lot to dig into here. John Cusack is, if there's one person who's nothing but a good guy in this movie, it's John Cusack as U.S. Marshal Vince Larkin. And I would say I kind of feel bad for him in that he doesn't get to ham it up quite as much, but he's still having a good time. Like I really like
oh, yeah.
he has, we'll talk about it when we get to scenes, but he does a lot of exposition dumping when it comes to introducing these people and giving you their background and what their crimes were. He's got a pretty entertaining back and forth with another character, the DEA agent we'll talk about in a moment. Their sort of B plot that runs throughout the movie. And then he finally gets to meet up face to face with Cameron Poe. And it's good. I mean, I'm a fan of John Cusack. He's a person that I can't imagine anyone hates his performances. He's just a great actor that always shows up and seems to be always on point. And the other big note I have for him is that, man, suits were so baggy in the 90s. What was that fashion style? Why his shirt is so big.
He full on looks like David Byrne in the Talking Heads concert movie with the big suit. Like, but the big
Andrew,
suit.
what is
for
this
that,
reference you are pulling out that I
You don't know who the Talking Heads are?
What? Okay, I
don't
know
know
who the
anything about
Talking
the
Heads.
Talking
I don't know anything about some concert
So-
performance. What am I googling here?
You're talking.
David
Googling
Byrne?
Talking Heads big suit.
David Byrne, big suit. Okay, I'm googling this. You think our listeners know what you're talking about? You think I'm the odd
I think
man
some
for
of
not?
them will. Yes.
Okay, what the?
Like, but the thing
It looks
is,
like
the thing
it looks
is,
like Max Headroom.
this was on purpose. Like, this was deliberately done this way. Like,
I
this
hope
was
so.
Like, yeah, like this was not him buying a suit and being like, "Yeah, this totally fits." It was supposed to be a big suit. The problem is that I think John Cusack looks closer to this than anything else, and I
Yeah.
don't think it's on purpose.
Correct. Just 90s fashion. Okay, if you're like me and you didn't know Talking Heads big suit, give it a Google. It's pretty funny.
That's it. The Jonathan Demme, speaking of Silence of the Lambs. No, that wasn't Jonathan Demme. Was it? Yeah, it was. He made a concert film for the Talking Heads called Stop Making Sense. That is very, very good. They just released A24 just released a 4K of it. But that's where that comes from. That concert film features the big suit, which became kind of a calling card for the Talking Heads for a long time. John Cusack's great. Like, I like almost everything I watch him in. Obviously, High Fidelity comes a few years after this. Being John Malkovich comes a few years after this. Ironically enough, if you want to watch John Malkovich and John Cusack team up again. He also, there's an underrated movie he did. I probably talked about this the last time I talked about Harold Ramis, but in 2005, he does a black comedy movie called The Ice Harvest. That's John Cusack, Billy Bob Thornton, Connie Nielsen, Oliver Platt, quite a big cast, but it's a genuinely great movie about thieves, criminals, hitmen, just black comedy stuff, but John Cusack is great in it. It's one of Harold Ramis's like last kind of, I think it's his second to last movie he ever made, and it's genuinely great. So just shouting that out to appreciate more of John Cusack and Harold Ramis.
Another alum of the show here, Andrew. Ving Rhames plays Nathan Diamond Dog Jones. Again, they all get
These guys are all pro
nicknames.
wrestlers, basically. They're just all
Basically,
they're all just
yeah.
basically pro wrestlers. Like
Um,
literally, you look at this cast list, and it's just like the Virus, the Marietta Mangler, Diamond Dog, Baby O,
Johnny 23.
Pinball, Swamp Thing, Sally Can't Dance. Like, all of them are just like, they're Billy Bedlam. Like, they're all just pro wrestlers. Like, they all.
It's great. I love it.
This plane is basically the VFW on a Saturday night in like 1993. Like,
Andrew, I love Ving Rhames in this movie. And I think now's a good time to make this hot take here. I haven't thought this through entirely. I'm just going to whip it out there. I think pretty much this entire cast, top to bottom, their performance in Con Air is like one of their 5 best performances in their career. I mean, look it up and down.
I don't think that I'm not going to fight you on that.
If not top 5, that might be pushing it. But they're all giving it 100%. No one's phoning it in by any means. Everyone is like acting their ass off or playing it up or dialed in, like you said, to exactly what the movie's asking of them. Or they're all on the same page. It's incredible how consistent the tone is in this movie. I've never seen Ving Rhames like this before. Like, I always see him playing a shade of either cool or badass, right? The Mission Impossible movies, he's usually like cool. That's his whole thing. He's got the crooked hat. He's a hacker, and he's just cool, man. And he's a alum of the show because we've covered Mission Impossible too. And then something like Pulp Fiction is born like the badass. He's intimidating and imposing, and you don't want to F with this guy. Here, he's just having fun. He's having a blast in a way that I've never seen him before in anything that I've seen him in. And yeah, he's a big guy and he's a bruiser, but like, he's not really being badass and imposing most of the time. He's just having fun. And it's a wild thing to say because he is explicitly like a black nationalist is what they say here on his Wikipedia. But he is a bad dude and like has done some horrible things like most of these people. But when I watch him on screen, I'm like, yeah, he's having fun and I'm having fun too. And like, look at him quip and have a blast. And they all like to have fun making the movie, which makes it, I have fun watching the movie. It's one of those things. But yeah, I genuinely one of my favorite Ving Rhames performances. It's so good.
It is. It's very good. Yeah, I at one point, Nic Cage tries to like put him against John Malkovich by being like, take these guys to frame, like, oh, you're taking orders from a white dude, and he's basically like, means to an end, man. Like, just about it's there's a goal to be achieved here, and this is the way to do it. But he's great. Ving Rhames is like, obviously, Mission Impossible is the thing that I think most people kind of like easily identify him with, just because that's got the mainstream appeal. But obviously, Pulp Fiction as Marcellus Wallace. He's also, the year after this, he's in, I mentioned this actually recently because I mentioned Out of Sight. I don't know why I mentioned Out of Sight recently. Was it Jennifer Lopez on Anaconda?
You told me I needed to watch it.
I think it was. I think it was because Jennifer Lopez is in it. And I think it was Anaconda because I think we talked about like all of her successes like post 2000s, and I was like, whoa, you just blew right through Out of Sight.
That sounds right.
But he's in that as well as George Clooney's kind of thief in arms, but. Anyway, he's great in that, but that's very much still like kind of shades of Mission Impossible, the type of character he's playing. He's just cool, but it is here. He, like you said, he's over the top. He's really getting to go, and that's the thing is, I think by the nature of the way these characters are, which is obviously they're all. That's probably a bad way to say that they're all criminals, but like they're all getting to like lean into basically every eccentricity they possibly can. So I wouldn't be shocked if the director literally was just like, go as ham as possible with this. Like, literally make this as insane as you possibly can. And I wouldn't be shocked at all if that's what the directive was. But like you said, almost any of these people, I would say this is definitely, especially of like the big 4 or 5 main cast members, this is definitely one of their most, I don't know, best performances is probably not the right word, but definitely the one where they're having the most fun.
Steve Buscemi plays Garland. And he also has the moniker of the Marietta Mangler, but his is used less than some of the other ones. They usually just refer to him as Garland. Garland Green, he is the baddest of the bad. He's the ultimate Hollywood serial killer. They have him the Hannibal Lecter-esque mask, but even beyond that, he's in this specialized truck to be transported in. Really super over-the-top stuff. And of course, when he's finally out of all of his shackles, he's just skinny, little weird-looking Steve Buscemi. Alum of the show, Billy Madison. We've probably talked about him somewhere else, but we've certainly talked about him before.
I like to think that Billy Madison is a prequel to this.
Sure.
Like, Billy Madison catches him, like, in the middle of the spree, and he just spares Adam Sandler because he apologized.
He called him, yeah.
So then, you know. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying it can almost work if you squint your eyes and look away and don't think about it too hard.
This movie utilizes Steve Buscemi's odd nature so well. Andrew, there's this actor, this classic actor I know you're familiar with, Peter Lorre, who was himself a distinct-looking gentleman. And then Looney Tunes would often draw Peter Lorre either as a character or like slap his face like on a fish. Like he would just be like a recurring sort of visual. Certainly a reference I never understood as a kid, but now I know that with that weird face in Looney Tunes was Peter Lorre. Steve Buscemi is like if you took that caricature drawing of Peter Lorre and turned him back into a human, you would get Steve Buscemi.
Like the retranslating thing, like when you retranslate something through a bunch of languages. Yeah, you just it's now I can't unsee that now, man. Why'd you got to do that? But
he's got distinct eyes that he's famous for, but even his lips are just a little off. He's just a strange looking fella. And I love this performance because it's not like he's never trying to be like cold or menacing. He's still kind of fun and funny. Like when he points out that everyone's on the plane dancing to Sweet Home Alabama, but it's ironic because Leonard Skinner, most of the members were killed in a plane crash. Like he just has little observations like that. He does have some creepy scenes, one in particular that are effective, but ultimately still seems like someone that's having fun in that.
All right. I have something I want to ask you.
Yeah.
I have a fan theory based off of nothing.
Okay.
There's the scene, obviously, I believe the scene you're talking about is the scene where he sits down and he talks to the little girl in the pool.
Correct.
He leaves that scene with one of the dolls.
Correct.
My fan theory based off of nothing.
Okay.
Is we were never supposed to find out that girl was okay.
And the studio made him add a scene of her
They
waiting.
added a scene so that we saw the girl alive so that people didn't think the character was too dark because they were going to do that gag at the end.
Andrew, I would not at all be shocked if that was a studio note or focus group.
I wouldn't even be shocked if it, like, before it even got to the studio, they were all like, whoa, guys. We can't have him kill a kid and then be gambling at the end of this movie. That would be really messed up. So, the fact that he gets the doll and he brings the doll with him is the only thing that makes me be like, why would he bring the doll with him and go through all of that if the girl's still alive? Like, why would he do that? That doesn't really make sense. Like, the doll is the token of what he's done. If he hasn't done anything, why do it?
Interesting. I would not be shocked. So they do let us sit in it for a while, and that could be why he brings the doll. And then we're like, is she okay? And there's a good 5 minutes or so before you finally see them take off and the girl's alive and she's waving with her doll. So it's like she gave him a doll for playing. So I guess the other way, though, I could see it as being like, yeah, he's killed people before, but that's not all he is. He's just an eccentric weirdo. And like in this instance, he did just want to have a tea party with the little girl. I don't know. But yeah, I think now that you've mentioned it, if I were a betting man, if someone told me, hey, one scene was added as a reshoot, that's probably the scene, the one where we see that the girl's okay. No, that's good.
Just
Andrew.
a theory.
Yeah, fair enough. What do you think? We've got Steve Buscemi in this movie.
I like it. I think there's it's obviously he is a very unique looking individual. Peter Lorre was notorious not just in the way that he looked, but he also had a kind of way that he talked too. That was kind of like very specific, and part of that was the fact that I believe he was German, and kind of like had to figure a lot of that out in real time. He was Hungarian actually, but he had that accented voice. He often got typecast as like sinister foreigners. A really good Peter Lorre performances, M. You haven't seen it. It's a Fritz Lang film made after Metropolis, but very, very good. But that comparison lends itself to Steve Buscemi a lot, in that he looks like there's nobody out there that looks like Steve Buscemi. Like, there really isn't.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly, like, one of the gags I kept seeing people did as a filter for a while is they took like normal people, but they gave them Steve Buscemi's eyes. And normal people, sorry, that sounds so mean. But like they would take like Brad Pitt and give him Steve Buscemi's eyes, and it completely changes him. Like, it just suddenly looked like it's all in the eyes, apparently. Yeah, the teeth too. But
my favorite is Hulk with Steve Buscemi eyes. Have you seen this one? I mean, this is a pretty good one.
Oh no, like the Hulk.
Just do Hulk, Steve Buscemi.
I have seen that. I have seen that one. They added like his whole face to that one.
Yeah.
Imagine the Hulk shows up and that's what he looks like. That would be the best. Anyway,
I just googled
Steve
the Brad
Buscemi
Pitt
here is
one.
great. Like the way he delivers lines, there's this very like specific kind of like define irony. He has these weird tangents he goes on where you can definitely tell he's definitely a guy that's high off his own sauce. Like, he buys his own hype. Like, define irony. It's a bunch of men in a plane dancing around to a song made famous by a band that died in a plane crash. Or like when he talks about madness being going to a job for 50 hours a week for 50 years, just so that you can retire and hope that whatever. Like, he has all these lines that like are that sort of like pseudo intellectual thing that like you hear it offhand and you're like, oh man, the guy's got a point. And then I'm like, yeah, but he killed. And then Nic Cage points out, he's like, yeah, you killed 30 people, man. Like, why would I listen to you? Like, like there's a line he gives that I love so much. It's earlier on. They say it's Garland Green, and the guy describes who he is, and Cameron Poe's like, well, he's on the right flight. But there's a line where I think he's God. I don't remember exactly what the line is, but Garland talks about how he drove around with this woman's head as a hat for like a bunch, like for days after he killed some girl. And I don't remember what he said, but Nic Cage says something along the lines of like, now would be a great time to stop sharing things. Like, he just tells you basically like, stop talking. I can't remember the exact line. That's going to drive me nuts. But Steve Buscemi's character is really great. He plays this part perfectly. Does exactly the kind of Hannibal Lecter adjacent thing that I'm sure they were going for. And it's great. Steve Buscemi's great. And he's great here. And it just speaks to like the things that he does. Because, like he does Billy Madison, like where he's just this eccentric character. He's not in the movie very much, but any of his Adam Sandler stuff, it's just this weird eccentric character he plays. And then you get something like this where obviously it's an over-the-top action thing, but he's still playing this kind of pseudo-serious character. And then he's got Coen Brothers stuff where it's just, quote-unquote real acting. And it just creates the strangest like dichotomy and slices of this man's career where like he just does the strangest stuff sometimes. But hey, all the more power to him.
It's weird that he's only done one Tarantino, right? He's just in Reservoir Dogs?
I think so, yeah.
Kind of odd he's never come back.
He is in Pulp Fiction, though, isn't he?
Oh, he's a waiter. Yeah, he's the Buddy Holly waiter. But it's basically a cameo. But yeah, fair enough.
But still, it's like I said, it's just a cameo. He is in... He's in Desperado, isn't he? But that's not... Obviously, it's not Tarantino, but...
Right.
Tarantino adjacent? But...
Andrew, there's a lot of convicts on this plane. I don't know if we need to go through all of them.
No.
Because that would take a long time. But they're all bringing it. I do want to shout out at least Dave Chappelle as a character they call Pinball, who's definitely like the lowest ranking guy that's part of this plan to overtake the plane, and they all treat him as such. There's this one part in particular where he gets held hostage by the undercover DEA, and he's threatening to kill Dave Chappelle's character. And Cyrus, the virus, has some pretty nasty words. I don't care if you kill that guy. He's just a blank, 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 blank. And once that DEA agent gets killed, Dave Chappelle asks John Malkovich, he's like, he didn't mean all that stuff he said earlier. And John Malkovich just says, "Give me that gun." He takes the gun. He goes, "Yes, I meant every word." Like, once he got the gun out of his hands, confirmed, like, "Yeah, it's exactly what I think of you." It's pretty funny. It's funny to see him kind of get crapped on by the other guys. He literally gets left behind at one of the stops. And that's one of my favorite scenes of his because he is responsible for hiding the tracking device onto a different plane so they can't find out where they're going. But he gets caught in the hangar. Someone's questioning why he's in there, and he tries to smoothly like flirt with her to remove suspicion. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm with that plane with all the prisoners. You know, I'm with the Department of Corrections." Caught me slipping. It's
Caught me slipping.
really good, really good. And then we'll get to like his actual death scene or post death scene, I guess, when we get to scenes later. But yeah, I mean, at this point, Chappelle is just really an up and coming actor and comedian. He goes on to, of course, hit super stardom with his show, and then he goes on a hiatus, and then it just never came back. Weirdly, he's just never reemerged since then. I don't know what happened. Kind of strange, but
definitely not burning down his career in real time, or his popularity at least.
Very, very funny though. I like his work here.
Yeah, it's very good. Like you said, he's another guy that's just a means to an end. He's responsible for the first distraction that allows them to take control of the plane, basically. And then, like you said, he actually gets. Yeah, we'll talk about his death a little bit later. But yeah, he's really good. I do want to shout out one other person, if you don't mind. There's obviously a lot of people here, but I do want to shout out Cole Meany. Plays DE agent Duncan Malloy.
His name's literally Meany.
Meany, but he's an Irish actor. Most people of a certain age probably know him from Star Trek. He played Miles O'Brien, who was one of the engineering guys on both Star Trek The Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Has the second most appearances of any Star Trek character ever.
Wow, that's surprising. That's wow.
He was in 225 episodes between all the different shows that he was on. He is beaten only by Michael Dorn as Worf. That is the only character who has appeared more than he has. But he's an Irish actor. I'm a big fan. I feel like we've talked about him before for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know if there's a movie that he's in or not that we talked about, but he's just another kind of classic character actor since Star Trek, especially.
Dick Tracy. Dick
Tracy. That makes sense. So I definitely talked about the Alan Partridge movie that he's in, where he plays a disgruntled radio jockey who turns that movie into Die Hard in a radio station, much like how this movie is Die Hard on a plane.
Oh my God, it is Die Hard on a plane. Yeah, but, it is.
I do love him. And so Alan Partridge is a longtime character played by Steve Coogan in the UK. He is a radio disc jockey who's kind of a Michael Brent, Michael Scott type, where that he's the comedy of the character is kind of just how oblivious he is to reality sometimes. But the character has evolved over time to kind of avoid some of the more problematic aspects of characters like that. Can't say the same.
Did you say Michael Brent? It's David Brent.
I said David Brent and Michael Scott.
Oh, you did? Okay. I thought you said Michael both times. Just want to make sure you get that correction there so we don't drive listeners crazy, right. But if you said it right, then I'll just cut all this. So go on.
Okay, perfect. Well, if I didn't say it right, then keep it in. Kind of a Michael Brent, Michael Scott type. But Alan Partridge is a character he still plays. He's evolved that character over time. So he's definitely taken, moved the character along with the times. Can't necessarily say the same for the comedians who play other versions of characters like that. Ricky Gervais, I'm talking about him. But anyway, he's very funny in that movie. He plays this disgruntled employee at one point. I love that he's driving around. They leave the station to try to escape from the cops. And all these people are like following them on the road. And Cole Meany's character is like, you see, man, these are my people. These are the normal working people of this country. And Alan is just like, well, it's the middle of the day. They're not really working, are they? That's just the type of observations Alan makes all the time. But Cole Meany is great. He has another like a strange career when you look. He just like randomly shows up in these movies as like every couple of years, just a big supporting part in some big movie, and I do like him a lot. So, very cool. So to see him here, I was reminded that he's in it, and just very cool.
I hate him in this movie, which
Yeah,
means he's
a
doing a
jerk,
great
don't get me
job.
wrong.
But
He's great.
props
He's
to
awful.
him. But God, he's so insufferable. You just want him to get punched in the face the whole
And he
time.
never
And he
does.
finally has this little, I don't know if redemption is the right word, but he makes the call not to shoot down the plane,
Yeah,
which probably would have resulted in less innocent lives lost than what they do, but that's
Probably.
neither here nor there. But that's his one moment of finally like listening to reason or whatever. But yeah, he's just awful. He has a license plate that says ass kicker. He is awful. He is the worst guy.
the only catharsis you get for this guy really is that his really nice car gets destroyed.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Andrew, let's talk about the scenes of this movie. We could be here all day going through this cast. They're all great. We'll continue to talk about them as we talk about the scenes they are in, but it's time to do just that and discuss the best scene of the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders, firing on all jet engines? What is the best scene in Con Air?
it's probably right when the plane takes off until it crashes at the end. That whole scene is probably my favorite.
The scene after the crash is also really good, and there's some good
It's
stuff
not
before
as
the
good
plane
as the
takes
one
off.
that came before it.
Sure,
It's
okay.
not quite as good. No, I love this whole movie. Like the whole time I was watching this, I was just like, what a blast. I was like, what a joy to live in a time to get to watch this movie. There's people in this world, Chris, that never got to see Con Air, and that makes me sad, honestly. There's
It is
people
sad.
that died the day before
You feel
it came out. That
So you
didn't
feel
get to
bad
see
for
it.
everyone who died in 1996 or before.
Abraham
'cause-
Lincoln never saw this. Maybe he would have been better if he had. I don't know. George Washington didn't even know what a
Wait,
con
what's your
was,
problem
probably.
with Abraham Lincoln that he needs to
I
be
don't know.
better?
Everybody can be better, man. Maybe the Civil War never starts if Abraham Lincoln sees Con Air.
Maybe if he was watching Con Air in the
maybe it's-
theater,
sorry,
he wouldn't have
maybe
got
it's
shot.
Jefferson Davis that needed to see Con Air to realize slavery was bad.
Okay.
Anyway, anyway, the scene I'm going with in particular is basically when Cameron takes control of the plane. So like we've been going through this whole thing. It's kind of the Hulk up scene for the white meat baby face. We kind of been going back and forth. They're back in the air after barely getting away from Lerner Airfield. Their supposed transfer aircraft doesn't appear, so they refuel it. They take back off. And they find what happens is they find the body of one of the inmates he'd killed previously. I don't know how they didn't realize he was missing before that, but ultimately, attack helicopters led by Cole Meany and John Cusack's character show up. They start shooting at the plane. Everything kind of goes wrong, but at this moment, Nic Cage takes control of the plane, and we get this montage of him just like walking through the plane, just beating down anybody that gets in his way, closing all the gates behind him. It makes a dude walking look really impressive. Which is not an easy thing to do.
That's when he gets shot, right? Like they shoot him in the arm and he just keeps walking forward.
No-sells it, just straight up no-sells it. Just straight up. Like I said, this plane is just the VFW in 1983. But just gets shot in the arm, no-sells it, beats down all these guys, finally gets into the cockpit and basically says, we're landing the plane. And the pilot, for some reason, kind of listens to him. I don't really know why, but I guess just they believe the gig is up. The helicopters are on him. There's no escape at this point, basically. So ultimately, this then segues into our massive crash through the city of Las Vegas, which just, if you're going to have a plane crash, Las Vegas is a cool
Strip.
place to do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, the first thing it does is it crashes through the Hard Rock Cafe sign, reminding me that the Hard Rock Cafe was and probably is still a thing. But I used to see my friends would go on vacation and they'd all come back with Hard Rock Cafe t-shirts because
That was such a staple of like school. Yeah.
Yeah, like be like, hey man, you see my Hard Rock Cafe shirt from Tampa? And I would be like, what's Tampa? But
here's my thing about Hard Rock Cafe, Andrew. When I am like in downtown Houston, I want to eat somewhere. I don't eat at Hard Rock Cafe. We have one here in Houston. It's like it's just like a franchise. I've had it before. Like it's kind of touristy. Like I don't eat at Hard Rock Cafe. When I travel to another city and they have a Hard Rock Cafe, I don't want to eat at Hard Rock Cafe. I want to eat something local to that city. I want to eat, like, the food of New Orleans or wherever the hell I am. If I'm in Las Vegas, I don't eat at Hard Rock Cafe. So I guess my question is, who's eating at Hard Rock Cafe? It's obviously they're very successful. They're still around, but, like, it's a novelty restaurant, and I don't know if it's supposed to be appealing to the people of the city or people visiting the city, but visiting a city and eating at a franchised restaurant seems antithetical to the purpose.
I don't disagree. I think it's just a tourist thing. We're just like, oh, hey, that thing, and you could get the shirts that say you went to the one in this city. It's all just consumerism, man.
Yeah, I guess.
Anyway, they crash through the Hard Rock Cafe and then end up just dragging this plane literally all the way through the strip until it literally crashes like right into a hotel or a casino. And it's just a really cool action set piece. But that build up to Nic Cage just kind of taking charge of the plane, doing all that, no selling, getting shot, and then the plane crashing there. That's, I wouldn't say the movie's firing on all cylinders at that point because most of the engines were gone by that point on the plane. But I was just like, what a gas. I was having a blast.
It's great. I mean, just the premise of this movie, it ends in a plane crash. That's just every plane movie. Which, by the way, isn't it crazy how many... Let's name movies that take place primarily on a plane, Andrew. Con Air. Air Force One.
Air Force One.
Of course, the movie Airplane. Yeah. Turbulence. Airplane. Flight Plan. Red Eye.
Airplane 2.
Airplane 2. A lot of movies take place. That's weird, right?
Airport 74
can think of,
might take place. Yeah.
I can think of one movie that takes place on a bus. What is it about airplanes that are... It's just a lot of people in a confined area, so that's just a good setting.
Like a bus, like... I can think of... Slacker's not primarily on a bus. He's just on a bus a lot. But it's... The thing about a bus versus a plane is, one, a bus is very confined. Like, I think, like if you're going to tell a movie that's set entirely on a bus, you're going to struggle with that. Because even Speed, like, has a lot of stuff that takes place outside the bus because it has to.
Yeah,
but, like,
I've never, all these plane movies, I've never seen one set on a plane that I've been on. All planes that I've been on, I look around, I'm like, you couldn't film a movie here. These planes they have,
I would.
In
if
the
you were
movies,
trying to film a movie in this plane, I would be pissed off because I don't have any space for my legs right now, man. And you want to fit a camera up in my face. But yeah, they're never real planes. They're never like, you look at the spacing, I was like, I wish I had that kind of leg room. Yeah. And now Southwest is getting rid of their free check bags policy, so now I don't know what airline to fly. This is terrible. But looks like it's Delta for me, folks. But
I do United.
I'm thinking about getting an airline credit card. Do you have one? Like, just get the points, start booking.
I use a lot of credit cards with points, but I don't have anyone that's miles related, so that might not be a bad idea.
For, folks, if you have any ideas, write in the Discord. But it's but with a plane, one, you have more space. But then you also get the added tension of the fact that they're literally in the sky. So there's this other piece of it. So you basically get more of like, it's almost a building that's flying through the sky. Like, and obviously when you get these bigger planes, like Air Force One is like Air Force One where there's like 3 levels to the plane. So like there's it's basically, it might as well be a skyscraper, but
I guess like trains are pretty popular settings as well. Can't think of as many train movies as plane movies. And trains is usually like a set piece rather than the entire movie. But still, same thing. It's confined and you can't easily escape it because they're moving so fast. Right,
that's the other piece of it. Like, you're in the sky, but there's no way out is the thing. Like the isolation aspect of it too. Like, you look at like Murder on the Orient Express, something like a classic one, or The Great Train Robbery, or even something like Unstoppable. The tension comes from, like a train that can't be stopped, or like the fact that we're all confined here. Like Agatha Christie obviously using confined, like, And Then There Were None is probably the most classic murder mystery novel, and it's probably the first one that's like, we're trapped on an island and there's nowhere to go, and the murderer is one of us. So that isolation aspect, especially when you have a mystery, is very good for squeezing out tension and creating drama, because it's like, cool, one of us is the killer and there's nowhere for the killer to escape.
Planes are the islands of the sky is something I've always said. So
yeah, and I've often said that islands are the trains of the earth. So it is so stupid. But
logic.
But anyway, there are a lot of train movies. We could do Train Month. We should do Train Month.
Okay, let's pencil that in. All right, so if you have a movie set on a plane, it's going to end with that plane crashing or landing. and that's a great pick. Even though like there's still
Crashing or landing, a very different outcome depending on which way that goes.
It's usually specifically a crash landing. It's
Usually,
always a
yeah.
crash landing. It's never a smooth landing. It's never a crash that kills everybody on board, except for United 93. But
Jesus Christ.
sorry,
Oh God, it was right there. I understand, but Jesus Christ.
am I wrong? Am I wrong?
You're
That's
not
all-
wrong.
Spoilers for
I
United
understand.
93. If you've never
Oh,
seen
my
United
God.
93, it ends with
Oh my God.
it's always a crash landing. Sorry, let me dig us out of the hole I just put us in. My favorite scene. I am going to go to the other side of the movie. And it's kind of two scenes when you really dive into it. But I mentioned earlier, it's when John Cusack is introducing the characters. Because this does such a good job of giving you entertaining exposition and setting the tone for this movie. Which, if you just read the premise of this movie on paper, convicts in the air, Die Hard on a plane, you probably picture a pretty different movie than what you get, different tone than what you get. You've got to kind of see it and vibe with the movie and see where it's going. And these introduction scenes, you've got like metal music playing in the score. These guys are getting off a bus one at a time in slow motion. He's doing like a voiceover, giving you their nickname, their crimes, how many people they killed, and they all seem so they're like rock stars, And it happens in two batches, I think, because you have like all the main guys. And then does he do it again when they pick up the other passengers? It's broken up into two for whatever reason. But so I'm kind of cheating. I'm jamming them together. But just introducing these criminals in a way that makes you not be sympathetic or empathetic, but makes you know that the movie's telling you like this is entertainment. Like this is their crimes aren't there. You're not learning about their kills to tell you, oh, this is the villain and the bad guy. It's in a way that like, oh, this is a bad dude. Watch out what he's gonna do. Like it's. I don't know. For the more I dig into it, the more I have a hard time putting the words because we're not supposed to like these guys. We're not supposed to want them to win, but we're supposed to be entertained by them, not fearful of them. If that makes sense, it's a weird tone to hit. And I think is another thing I said before we hit record, but this is the most pre 9/11 maybe of any movie we've covered. Because one, it's about hijacking of an airplane, but it's not a drama. It's not in dramatic fashion. It's done so casually, which would never happen again in a movie after 9/11. And it is just, the character of Johnny 23 is called that because that's how many women he's raped. And they don't make rape a joke, but it's also not a thing that's like
Taken seriously.
Exactly. Yes. Even though I do kind of like that Cyrus the Virus, even for him, that's too far and he looks down on him. I think that's about as moral high ground as you can get in a movie like this. Yeah. But at any rate, nothing's really, you're not supposed to hear about killings and rape stuff. It's not supposed to hit you in the gut. It's supposed to just kind of roll off your back and you're along for the ride.
Really
These are
because he did this. It's not. Yeah, you're not. It's only used to hype up how bad this guy supposedly is, which is odd given that technically I would say the gravity of his crimes is so much worse than some of these other people that yet he's played as henchman number 9. He's so far down the hierarchy that the fact that he's treated that way is very odd to me. It's more, I guess, an indicator of the times. Obviously, pre 9/11 movie, but there is a I wouldn't say it's an irony, but a sadness maybe. But I don't know. But
he gets his comeuppance of all the guys he really gets his comeuppance.
Cathartic.
So to bring it back, played by Danny Trejo, we should say. We didn't cover him in the cast, but it's Danny Trejo, being Danny Trejo, alum of the show.
From Anaconda.
And probably 5 other things. The dude does everything, but he's always great. To kind of bring it back to my favorite scene, I love the introduction to this, and I want to make a comparison that might sound strange at first, but walk with me, if you will, Andrew.
I'll think about it.
Suicide Squad The David Ayer one. That's the one without the right? Suicide Squad.
The bad one,
No.
yes.
Hashtag PP. We've covered it on this show. This positives. We talked about it. But yes, that's kind of my point. The first, like the opening act of that movie, I like a lot. And they do this thing where they introduce each of these characters. It's got fun music playing. It's got like their stats written out on screen, and it's like diegetic. It's like it's displayed in a super cool way. I'm like, man, this is kind of a blast. Cut to 2/3 of the way into that movie, and all these same characters are walking through a gray city and talking about their sad backstories, and it's a totally different tone. And I don't attack any of the. I mean, it's David Ayer movie, but the movie was taken away from him, and different people. It's a whole mess. We covered it, but the end product is a movie that is not balanced tone wise. You have this fun, super fun introduction to these characters, and then it kind of flips and it becomes all these different things. It's incredible to me. Con Air carries that tone throughout this entire movie, and this introduction of these super bad guys done in such a fun way that it tells you this is just entertainment. Don't get bogged down in the tragedy of it. I think is super important scene to set the tone for this movie, and that's why I'm picking it as my favorite of the movie.
I think it's a great pick, and I think it's an interesting thing to call out with the with just the way that it handles that, because it could be something that, it could bog it down to minutia, or it could take it down and be like, oh, we're going to dive into these characters and find out all of their stuff. And you just don't care. And that's the thing. A movie like Suicide Squad, I don't care about these characters' backstories. What we're saying is that Con Air is basically Suicide Squad done right. That's the long and short of this. No, it's not, because nobody in this person is accomplishing a mission of any kind, not a good thing. But anyway, it is a great comparison, but I do think these are fun. Like you said, it's exposition. They find a way to make it interesting. These kind of exposition dumps can always be something that's kind of like, can be tough, because there's definitely movies we've done like that, back all the way on episode 1, Green Lantern. Green Lantern starts with huge exposition dumps that are meant to cover a lot of ground that are also setting up sequels that never happen. But it is a difficult thing to balance. So to be able to introduce all these characters, make it fun, make it interesting, sell how bad everybody is all at once, it works really, really well. So I will agree with your shout out here.
Andrew,
my permission.
Are Star Wars films the only movie? How am I trying to say this? Starting your movie with a scrawl or text you have to read is almost always bad, right? Like, it's always like, the movie's going to tell me this information anyway. Why am I reading it? Is Star Wars the only successful use of that?
Certainly the most high-profile successful use of it. I'm sure there are other instances of exposition dump at the beginning of movies that don't hold them back or bog them down. But yeah, I obviously Star Wars is the most famous for sure.
Let us know any other time that you've enjoyed reading something at the beginning of the movie. I think it actually works to that movie's benefit. I would like to know. Andrew, what's some other scenes that we like in this movie? Let's break it down here.
Like,
it's great,
guys. There's no shortage of scenes. Like, it's like at one point, like we mentioned obviously the scene where Danny Trejo's character gets his comeuppance. It's obviously very cathartic. He's basically come back to the plane and is trying to attack this one female officer on the plane, which, no offense, I'm all about equality in the workplace. Doesn't necessarily feel like that's the type of place you should put something like that. But ultimately, like, the one guy who's literally dying because he needs insulin is trying to stop him and he can't do it. And then right when it looks like something awful is about to happen, John Cena shows up and punches him in the face. And then they straight up, they all get a chance to get a shot in at him, and then they chain him up, and then he loses an arm in the plane crash. Like,
I love that
attaches from his body. I love
that reveal. Yes,
so good. Like, they're genuinely like, well, this guy's dead, and they start pulling him away, and then you realize the arm is not going with him. I was like, perfect.
It's awesome.
No notes.
That plane crash, the aftermath, or I should say the bad guys dying, they are so definitive about all of them. Perhaps the most with Cyrus the Virus. Because the plane crashes, it's the climax of this movie, and then there's a whole other action set piece after that involving like a runaway fire truck and a big chase scene, and it's crashing through buildings, and Cyrus ends up going through a building, hitting power lines, landing on a conveyor belt, ending up underneath, what is that thing that's pounding the ground? I don't even know. But it slams his head. You see his leg twitch. He dies like 5 deaths at the end of this movie. Like, it's so definitive
like 6
and
times.
so over the top. I absolutely love it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It is. His death is really, really good. Like you said, they make sure he's dead. Like, they have like the driver of the fire truck, Swamp Thing, who's also the pilot on the plane at a certain point.
Cool nickname.
Cool nickname. He's not green at all. It's weird. But
it's not an accurate nickname, but it's a cool one.
Not at all, but cool. Again, wrestlers. But it is like the entire cab of a fire truck fills up with water, and the window finally crashes and he flows out onto the street. Ving Rhames, another one. They make sure you know that he's dead. They definitely do not mess around with making sure that you know all of these inmates met terrible, terrible ends, except one.
Yeah, arguably, not even arguably, the worst one. The one the movie builds up as the worst guy. He's killed at least 30 people up and down the eastern seaboard. Does that word again you only hear in movies, seaboard? What does that mean? Does it just mean eastern coast? I don't know. I still don't know. But Steve Buscemi is a horrible, horrible psychopath. The most serial killer of serial killers. He doesn't kill that little girl. But he also has given us no indication that he's redeemed himself anyway. But the very last scene in the movie is him escaped and free in Vegas and gambling at a craps table. And we cut to credits. And then we get the ending credit sequence where we see all the characters on screen smiling like it's the credits of a TV show or something. And it gives us the actor's name.
The Full House theme to come in. Like, just
and yes, and their nickname. And it goes to the whole cast. And again, it's always a scene of them like laughing or smiling, like
an outtake or something. Yeah.
Yes. But it doesn't feel like we're breaking. Again, it's this consistent tone throughout the entire movie. Which, again, if I haven't done so already, I've got to heap so much praise on our director, Simon West. It's incredible to me that this is his directorial debut. Andrew, I told you something, I think, before the episode started, and that I will now admit on mic, because this isn't normally the kind of thing I get wrong, but I thought this was a Michael Bay movie. Literally, until I was researching this movie, I thought it was directed by Michael Bay. I thought it was the movie he did between The Rock and Armageddon. Like, it is produced by Jerry Bruckheimer. Maybe that's where my wires got crossed. I don't know, but it feels like Michael Bay. Like, there's maybe not quite the frenetic editing that Michael Bay becomes known for in this movie, but I also don't think he did that on The Rock either. So it just feels like an early Michael Bay movie. But that's all. I'm still nothing but praise for Simon West, because again, to establish this tone, to have so many characters but have them all feel like they have their time to shine, like he just does. It's a big Herculean task. All the action scenes. Andrew, how many set pieces are in this movie? For a movie that takes place primarily on an airplane, you have 8 major action set pieces, maybe. Like, every time they land, there's 3 of them. There's a fight scene in the crawl space, in the cargo space of the airplane, where our 2 characters have to be crouched the entire time, and they make that dynamic and exciting. Incredible work by our director, Simon West. Really can't praise him enough for this.
You know, Rick Astley prepares people for greatness. That's all I can really say here. You gotta. Anyway, no, I agree. Like, it genuinely kind of shocked me, just like finding out this was the first movie he ever made. There's definitely a world, I think, where Michael Bay would direct a movie like this, but I'm guessing, he had just done The Rock and was probably knee deep on I don't know what he would have had going.
Armageddon, I guess. It comes out in 98.
I guess Armageddon. Because The Rock is 96, so Michael Bay, what's he doing after this? Yeah, Armageddon's 98, so I assume that's what he was doing, and then he just
That's
went
what
to
Bruce
Steve
Willis
Buscemi
did
for that.
instead.
And then Steve Buscemi just did both. Bruce Willis, what's your excuse?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But
Andrew, I mentioned this fight in the cargo space. We have to acknowledge what is arguably the most famous line of this movie. And rewatching the movie now, it's almost like the movie knew this would be the big line because they hit it 3 times. Our character of Cameron Poe is bringing a gift to his daughter that he's never met because it is her birthday. He wants to bring her a little stuffed bunny. It's very important to him. And when he sees someone remove that bunny from the box that he is carrying it in, he tells them to put the bunny back in the box. And then he tells them again, he says, I said, put the bunny back in the box. And then they have a big fight, and he hits it a 3rd time after he kills this guy. He just says, why couldn't you put the bunny back in the box? It's 3 times.
just
Put the bunny back in the box. It's like the movie knows.
And then literally
how
towards
absurd
the
it is.
end, John Malkovich is like holding the bunny hostage.
Holds a gun up to its head, yeah.
Literally, like, just so that we can get to the end of this and have Nic Cage hand his daughter the most beat up, decrepit stuffed bunny ever.
But it's got a story, you know? It's got a story attached
It
to it,
does.
so it makes
you
it
know,
special.
that bunny has been through a lot, just like Nic Cage. Similar stories, really, at the end of the day. They've both faced similar trauma. But it's God, this movie is so good.
There's he gets so many like action hero lines. He finally comes face to face with John Cusack, and John Cusack's like, look, your family wants you to come home. He's like, I don't leave a man behind. And he's heading back to the plane, and John Cusack is like, what are you gonna do? And he says, what do you think I'm gonna do? I'm gonna save the fucking day. And he goes, it's so cool, but it's a ripped Nic Cage with an Alabama accent. It's so absurd.
It's so ridiculous. I love
But
at one point. Go ahead.
It works. The crazy thing is that it works. It all works. It just freaking works, dude.
It does. At one point, just the way his quips are, like Johnny 23 at one point is like, do you know what I am? And Cameron Potos goes, ugly all day.
Yes,
like, just,
so good.
He's not intimidated by these guys at all. He's not at all like anything. It's like he has no issue standing up to these guys whatsoever. When he kills or when he's beating up Johnny 23, he literally goes like, don't treat women like that.
There's a time when his friend Baby-O, when Garland first gets on the plane and says something weird, and Baby-O goes, what's wrong with him? And Poe says, my first thought would be a lot.
Like, just not at all like not contributing to the conversation whatsoever, but still 100%.
Just these like
great.
Phil McGraw-esque quips, like in phrases, but he's a badass action star. It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, there's a super cheesy one at the end where Bishop, who's the female officer we've discussed, she's thanking Poe for saving her life, walking away, and she literally turns back and says, hey Poe, next time take the bus. And they both laugh, and it's like, that's what you put like in a parody of action movies, but here it is in an action movie, and again, I'll say it again, it just works. Like this movie is like a made in a lab over the top 90s action movie, and I freaking love it, dude.
I agree completely. There's no
the plane crashes into a casino and the slot machine pays out. Like
it does.
It's amazing.
When the plane crashed into the casino, I was like, do it. Like I didn't remember if it happened or not, and I was like, you better do it. You better not waste this moment. And they didn't. Thankfully, it pays out.
And that's a metaphor for what's happening in this movie. It's just paying out like a slot machine at the end.
And again.
Everything you saw set up is paying out.
Look at just the work of Simon West as the director and the writer of this film too. Just masters of the craft on the first film. They Citizen Kane themselves. 100%.
Truly.
There was nowhere to go but down after this. 100%. But I I just some of the stuff he says were like they take off, and the problem is that Cole Meany's Corvette is like flying on the back of the plane because it was like attached to it. And so like this plane is flying through the air with this Corvette just trailing behind it on a rope. And Nic Cage is just like, on any other day, that might seem strange. And just moves on with his line. And then just the stuff, like he's talking to John Cusack at one point, and he's like, sorry, boss, but there's only 2 men I trust. One of them's me. The other's not you. Just nonsensical stuff. But it all works. It all lands, and I'm just so happy to watch it.
Andrew, there's a character. Let me make sure. I want to shout out the actor because it's not someone that we covered, but Renali Santiago plays Ramon Martinez, who is they're very effeminate in the way they talk, and the first thing they do when they take over the plane is find a dress and wear a dress. I think in today's language we would say this is a trans person. What I like. Look, this isn't like a progressive film or anything, but
no,
I didn't see anything with this character that made me cringe or age too well. It's never the butt of a joke, the fact that they are wearing a dress. Everyone seems to kind of accept this person for who they are, and that's cool. But Andrew, whenever, in your favorite scene, whenever Poe is taking over this plane, he's dispatching everybody, and the last person standing in his way is this character, and he holds up a fist, but he can't bring himself to punch them. This person who I would assume uses she, her pronouns. So he flattens his hand and slaps them instead before walking into the cockpit. Brilliant moment. I love that. It's so funny.
Yeah, it's needlessly funny. It just works so well. I do also want to shout out Rachel Ticotin. I don't know how to say her name. She's the female corrections officer on the plane, and I'd feel bad not calling out like the one woman in this movie beyond Nic Cage's wife.
Sure, who is hardly a character. Nic Cage's wife.
Nic Cage's wife, but she plays Sally Bishop. She's the one that gets kind of targeted by Johnny 23 during the movie, and the one that he saves later. And then she does get a kick in on Johnny 23, but then she also does get to take out John Malkovich for a little bit later in the movie as well, which I thought was cool that they gave her a big moment to kind of also hit him in the face with the end of a gun. And, just cool to see. But I love this movie, guys. I'm going to watch it again once we're done with this. I'm going to watch this like 8 times. One of those things. Now I remember how great it is, and I'm just going to watch it all the time.
It's a great movie, and Con Air sounds like the character of Cameron Poe saying the name Connor.
Con Air.
Con Air. That's
my
all.
dearest Con Air, understand that this was not my intention. I did not intend to end up in this jail for 8 years.
I do declare.
My dearest Con Air, please understand. Please tell our daughter. I could not have. I love when he's like talking about like his wife and his daughter could never visit him in prison because he never wanted his daughter to like see him in prison, basically. And it's like, yeah, but like 8 years is a long time, man.
You're just never gonna meet your daughter. That's so wild. It's such a what's the word I'm looking for? It's not brave. It's the heart's in the right place. It's a noble thing. It's a noble thing. But dude, just meet your daughter. Come on, just see your daughter. Come on.
Oh, and I did remember what that line was. It's after this is my last bit. It's after Cameron has the fight with Billy Bedlam in the belly of the plane. But he comes back up, and that's when Garland Green's like 2 went down, 1 came up, and he goes on to this whole that's when he goes on his whole thing about, working 50 hours a week at a job for 50 years, ending up in summertime. He goes on that whole thing. And that's when Poe is like, murdering 30 people, semantics are not as insane. And that's when Garland's like, one girl I drove through 3 states wearing her head as a hat. And that's Cameron turns to him and goes, it's my daughter's birthday today, so please feel free to not share everything with me. And I'm like,
There you go.
And that is a line that I'm going to try to work into my standard lexicon.
Andrew, I think we're in store for a heck of a month here. We've done months all with one actor before, right? I know, like we did Matrix month, which made us talk about the same actors over and over again. We've done director months. I don't know. Maybe it's the first time we've done it based on an actor. There's no way to check, but I think
we did Terminator month, and like that's obviously you're going to talk about Arnold a lot. Like, we did
So what
month. Yeah,
it can be tough when you've got to talk about the same actor week after week and have new takes on them, or this, talk about their similar performances over and over again, especially when they're playing the same character. But Nicolas Cage might be the best actor to do an entire month on, because we'll see if this holds true, but I feel like as we bounce around his career, these different performances, I don't think there's going to be a lot of similarities one-to-one. Even though Nicolas Cage is a distinct actor and there's plenty of Nicolas Cage isms, his movies are kind of all over the place. I think we're still going to find a decent amount of variety as we go through this month. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I don't have any question about that. Like, and by the fact that it doesn't really matter how we go about it. Obviously, we haven't really told anybody what the lineup is necessarily yet, but there's so many different eras of Cage. When you look at the early stuff like Raising Arizona, and then you get into the 90s with The Rock and Con Air, and then you get into the 2000s with some of the kind of, some would call it the decline, but kind of the at this point he's the established movie star.
I feel like we got sick of him being an A-lister, and then there's that weird phase where like the rumor, I'm sure it's not more than a rumor, I think it's substantiated, but like he was taking a bunch of roles because he had financial problems, like he bought too many houses or whatever. I remember that like being a huge story, and people were like, oh, he'll just do anything, and his movies were suddenly not released in the US or straight to video or straight to streamers. And then it's like the industry caught up with him because he continued to make like small budget indie movies, but those kind of movies found a home on streaming, and he's kind of reinvented himself in recent years as like this auteur, like indie actor that does these great roles and these like, huge dramatic roles. I mentioned Mandy earlier, Pig, Joe, like these small movies, but that he is like lauded
Joe
for his
is great,
performances.
dude. I don't think we're going to talk about it this month, but people like that comes out like in the thick of like the decline of Cage, and it is great. It is.
I haven't watched. I think it's one of the ones that I own and haven't watched. There's a lot of them, but
David Gordon Green, like pre-Halloween, pre-everything, based on a book by Larry Brown, but it's him and it's Ty Sheridan, and it is just genuinely really, really good. And I feel like it flies under the radar. That was 2013, so a little bit older, not quite in like the 16, 17, 18 when he was doing like 7 movies a year, even into 19. But even so, 18 is when you get Mandy, and I think that's kind of when the reevaluation starts. And I think Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent was kind of like
it's like the acknowledgement
self-aware moment, like the acknowledgement of all of it. And now he's got stuff coming out, like he's got Renfield, which was a relatively big deal when it came out, just Nic Cage Dracula. You've got stuff like Dream Scenario, like still kind of doing those small indie movies. He had one just come out called The Surfer, and then obviously last year also had Longlegs from Oz Perkins, and then he's got a couple of things coming up this year.
I mean, there's Spider-Verse, pretty high-profile thing that he gets to be part of.
Also, we'll be playing Spider-Man Noir in a Spider-Man Noir show because life is weird. Live action, no less. Like,
really?
There's going to be a live-action Spider-Man Noir show starring Nic Cage. Like,
huh?
Life is really weird, dude. He showed
Well,
up in
Andrew-
Dead by Daylight as himself. Like, this dude's, yeah, like, it's the video game Dead by Daylight. Like, he's just in it as Nick Cage.
Nick
I'm like,
Cage is in that?
like,
Is he a
it was
playable
like an
character?
added Yeah, I don't know if he's playable, but I was just
He's-
like, man.
Well,
what a-
yeah, there's no NPCs in the game. He's got to be. I assume he's a survivor, not a killer. I'm gonna look into this. I've got.
Yeah.
I think I have like 500 hours into Dead by Daylight, but I haven't played it in a few years now. I'm kind of scared to
It
go
looks
back.
like it's. I'm looking at the DLC, and downloadable content, and on July 25th, 2023, Nicolas Cage, and played by Nicolas Cage.
That's
I guess
incredible.
it's just a very specific thing. The survivor is Nicolas Cage. I don't know what this note means, but it is. Got a little. I have no idea what that means. But anyway,
I'll be doing further research, but now
Yes,
comes the part of the show, Andrew, where
yes.
I get to ask you something. It's called Ask Andrew, and I get to spring a question on you, and you have to answer it. Those are the rules. If you want to help me with these, hop into that Discord. There's a channel called Ask Andrew. You can suggest some things for me to spring on him. But Andrew, I have a question. I'm going to get to it, but first a little bit of background. There's a band called Fuel that had their heyday in the 90s. Hits like Shimmer and Sunburn and Hemorrhage. Huge radio hits. Big band in the 90s. And I love 90s music, 90s bands. Those are my favorite concerts to go to these days. They're doing like 20, 25 year anniversaries of albums that I love. And you see them at like a decent sized venue, but it's not like a stadium. It's affordable seats. It's just great. So Fuel, I was a big fan of, especially the first 3 albums. And I was thinking like, I wonder if they're out there touring. I knew the lead singer had left the band, but then I heard he was back in the band. And so I wanted to look into it a little bit, and I discovered something about the band, Andrew. So the original lineup of the band, I won't even bother with names here. You got your lead singer, you got your guitarist, you got your bassist, and you got a drummer. Now, the drummer starts changing pretty early on. Like, after, I think, 1 album, they changed drummers, and it's been kind of a revolving door. But you've got 3 other founding members throughout, like I mentioned, those first 3 albums, which would be, if you know a song by Fuel, it's off on those first 3 albums. Okay? And then the singer leaves the band. And the remaining members get a new singer, and they put out a new album. Not too crazy, right? This has happened in plenty of bands before. You just have a change in singer. But here's the thing, Andrew. Remember I said that I had heard the lead singer came back to the band? So he comes back to the band, but the lineup changes, and you have the original singer back with a different guitarist and a different bassist and a different drummer. He is now the only original member with a whole new lineup, but they're called Fuel, and they put out additional albums. Now, here's the thing, Andrew. He leaves the band again, I think in 2020. And then they get a new singer. The original guitarist comes back, but not the original bassist. And, of course, not the original drummer, because they've been changing drummers. So now the current lineup of Fuel is only the original guitarist. They've actually gone through 2 singers since the original singer left again, and he's an original band member. Very strange situation, right? My question for you, Andrew, is what is a band? What can you say is Fuel?
A band is a collection of living individuals. I was actually, so you're actually slightly incorrect. I'm looking at the Wikipedia right now. The drummer.
Are you looking
currently
at the
in
chart?
I am looking at the chart, but the drummer in Fuel right now is the drummer off those first 3 albums.
Off album 2 and 3.
No, he's listed for all of them. Kevin Miller is listed as the drummer for the first 3 Black Lines on this.
Oh, the Black
98,
Line is an album?
2003.
Oh,
The Black
hey,
Lines on the chart are albums. The
Andrew?
Gray Lines, I'm assuming, are EPs.
good call. I was going off my own personal knowledge. I thought the first album came out in 96, but it looks like it came out in like 97.
98.
So, okay. All right. Fair enough.
Sunburn in 98. So anyway.
Okay. So we have
really
original
point.
guitarist.
So you have the classic drummer.
Yeah, classic drummer.
Not the original drummer, but the classic drummer. You have the original lead guitarist. And then you have all new. Everybody else around them is all new. It's so odd to me, like you mentioned, that like the drummer, Brett Scallions, I guess, is basically the current version of Fuel in 2010 just disappeared so that the original lead vocalist could do his own version of Fuel for 10 years, basically. And then the version of Fuel that existed before sort of came back. I don't know. Anyway, it's not.
But I feel like.
Go ahead.
Well, not to get too off track here, but Brett Scallions, the singer, he had left the band. We don't know the specifics, but seems to be on not great terms. He does solo stuff. I imagine if you go to a solo show for Brett Scallions, he's gonna play Fuel songs. But he's not Fuel. He's not Fuel, right? He doesn't call himself Fuel because Fuel exists with its original guitarist. Like, it's a separate entity. How is this decided? Is it a rights thing? Is it complicated paperwork?
It's probably a legal thing. Because this happened. So this is actually not that uncommon. Especially with bands once egos get away. Like,
this is the most convoluted one I've come across.
It is. I would say this is definitely the most convoluted, where like a version of the band stops existing, so a wholly different version of the band can exist, and then that different version of the band stops existing, so the version that existed before can exist.
Yeah.
The other ones that I was thinking of.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the driving force of the version before comes back and puts together yet a new version of the band again. Yeah. I'm reminded of Pink Floyd in '85 a lot because Roger Waters in 1985 decided that he was done with Pink Floyd. He thought Pink Floyd, there was no further avenues to explore with Pink Floyd. So he sought to dissolve that band. And the other three members of the band went, no. Like, no. Like, we would like to still exist as a band, and if you're going to leave, then we're just going to move on without you. And he was like, well, no, you're not. You're not going to move on without me. I'm going to sue you, and I'm going to stop you. And he failed at that, which is why Pink Floyd in 1987 kicked off a world tour where they played 50,000-seat arenas, while Roger Waters was playing 3,000-seat auditoriums, because it turns out people didn't really care about Roger Waters without Pink Floyd. And so that became a big, drawn-out legal battle that never really got resolved. Roger Waters he was allowed to call himself like a former member of Pink Floyd, but he was never just allowed to call himself Pink Floyd. Which the bass player and occasional singer of a band should never just be allowed to call themselves by the band name. Whereas the classic keyboardist, drummer, and lead guitarist and vocalist were like, we're going to keep being Pink Floyd. Some more recent examples I find interesting is Queensryche. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the band Queensryche.
Super familiar, know the name.
Operation Mindcrime, Eyes of a Stranger was their big kind of heyday in the late 80s, early 90s. Their lead singer is a gentleman named Jeff Tate. They had most of their classic band was together for a long time, but at some point in the 2010s, there's this rift that starts forming between Jeff Tate and the rest of the band. This literally leads to a legal decision, which results in two different versions of the band existing. You had Jeff Tate's Queensryche, and then the rest of the guys in their own version of Queensryche. Eventually, this got settled so that Jeff Tate's version of the band just called themselves Operation Mindcrime, which was the name of their kind of classic album, and the other band just kept calling themselves Queensryche. So I've seen versions where two versions of a band exist at the same time. I think LA Guns is another one where this has happened, but it's not that uncommon that you have two versions of a band that exist. Sometimes they have clarifying parts of their names. It'll be like LA Guns featuring X, Y, and Z, or LA Guns or LA Guns. It's not that uncommon. This is probably the only instance I can think of where a band essentially wholesale stopped existing to allow a different version of it to exist with no crossover members between either version. I can't think of another instance.
It's so weird
where that has happened. The rule of thumb that I have always employed is that if you are going to call yourself a band's name, you need to have at least 50% of the classic lineup, and one of those people has to be the lead guitarist or the lead singer. Ideally both. But
driving force of the band.
Like,
so
you need to
so
have,
Fuel,
have,
the current incarnation. Okay, well, let me ask you this, Andrew.
It's closer than it's not. It's closer than it's
the
not.
The current
There's
incarnation has two of what you would call a classic lineup. I believe the guitarist is a songwriter. I believe, I'm not going to research any further than that, but a significant driving force. But if you back up a little bit to when Brett Scallions returned to Fuel, he was the only original singer.
Right.
But he's the lead singer. Like he has a distinct voice. It sounds like Fuel. Do
As
you
you
think?
said before, though, Brett Scallions is not Fuel.
Well, okay.
Because if all he wants to do is
right
go
now
play
he's
Fuel
not Fuel.
songs,
Right now
But
he's doing solo shows, not as Fuel. But whenever he returned to the band, he was the only original member, and they were calling themselves Fuel. They released an album as Fuel, but that doesn't pass your 50% test.
No.
So do you take issue
There's
with that?
plenty of bands that don't. I saw.
Okay.
I like. There's a classic band called Grand Funk Railroad. The classic members left of Grand Funk Railroad are the drummer and the bass player. Guess what, guys? Nobody cares. Nobody cares who the drummer and the bass player for Grand Funk Railroad were. Nobody cares who the lead singer and guitarist for Grand Funk Railroad is, to be fair, which is why they could get away with it. Like, so many of those classic 60s, 70s, 80s bands will do things like that. Like, there is a very, my screen just went dark. Foreigner, classic band, hot-blooded, jukebox hero.
Yeah.
I saw them in concert. Of the lineup that was playing on stage, none of them were in the classic lineup of the band. The only member who came on as a special guest later in the set. So for me, like, that's nothing. Like, you're not Foreigner at that point.
But they call themselves Foreigner, to be clear. You bought tickets to a Foreigner show.
Yeah. Well, this was a big, like, multi-bill thing. It was like Styx, Foreigner. It was one of those things they did at the Woodlands when, like, the classic rock station would be like, and here's, like, it was, I don't remember who all it was. I think it was Styx and Foreigner were the main guys. There was a couple of others there. Styx is another one where, like, Styx rides the line, but still falls on the we're going to allow it side more than not. Because like Styx had a very prominent keyboardist vocalist named Dennis DeYoung, who has not been in the band since like 97. But the other guitar players who sing and play lead guitar are both still there. So there's an argument to be made. That's my rule of thumb. Like The Who is one that people ask about a lot. Like, but Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend, the lead vocalist and lead guitarist of The Who, both still tour as The Who. If they're going to tour without the other, they don't call themselves The Who. Like I saw Roger Daltrey by himself, and he didn't have Pete Townsend, so he didn't call it The Who. But my internal barometer has always been at least 50% of the band, and one of them has to be important. Like, you can't, it sounds backhanded. Obviously, bands are a sum of their parts, but like, if you have a primary driving creative force, like, you can't do it without them and say it's the band. Like, obviously, there's a variety of different opinions about that. There are a great many there are plenty of people who thought that when Roger Waters left Pink Floyd, it was done. They're like, there's no point in calling it Pink Floyd if Roger Waters isn't there. And obviously, if you listen to Pink Floyd's albums before Roger Waters left the band and after, they sound very different. There are things that sound the same simply because there's the same musicians there. But, you know, you lost his songwriting, you lost his lyrics, you lost his input, but at the same time, you then understood, oh, there are things about this band, though, that maybe I didn't realize were the result of other members of the band. But anyway, that's always been my internal checkmark, is that you need at least half of them, and one of the driving creative forces or faces of the band needs to be included. Like I said, Grand Funk Railroad is the one I jumped to with, like, it's the bassist and the drummer, and it's like, cool. Like, I guess if, like, Primus, like, like, if your bass player is, like, the most notable member of the band, like, I guess that's one thing, but, like, it's like the Police. The Police can't tour without any one of those guys, though. Like Rush. Rush has two of its three members are still alive, but I would hesitate to think they're ever going to tour as Rush again, just because it's so ingrained. Now, like ZZ Top, one of their members did die, and they still tour. They just have another guy playing bass instead. And it's like, well, cool. I guess that's an option. But
I mean, you look at really weird with this. You have the Gorillaz, who are the Gorillaz? They're 4 animated characters. Like, that's the band. The people behind the band is one artist, one singer, a musician, and one artist that draws them. But, like, the person playing guitar, the person singing other parts other than 2D's voice, the bassists are all just a revolving door of musicians. But I could see Gorillaz on any one of their tours and say, yeah, I saw the Gorillaz. Like, that's because that's the band, even though the musicians change. But with something like Fuel, if I saw them during the era without Brett Scallions or when it was the only lead singer, like, I had a hard time being like, yeah, I saw Fuel. One of my favorite bands is Our Lady Peace, and they've got a real Ship of Theseus thing going right now. Did I say that right? Theseus? Is that the right metaphor here?
Theseus, yep.
So their first album, Navid, has a bass player that leaves the band shortly after that album and is quickly replaced by Duncan Coots, who isn't technically a founding member, but I think the fandom pretty much embraced him as a mainstay because he comes on so early. But again, technically not a founding member, technically not on that first album. But your lead singer, your guitarist, and your drummer all still there, and they remain for 3 more albums, and then the guitarist leaves, who was the founding member of the band. He literally put them together. The guitarist departs, they replace him, and it's actually after that that they have their biggest hit in America. It's where Somewhere Out There hits in America, and they have this big crossover success. So they don't have their founding guitarist anymore. And then they go for a long time, and then the longtime drummer leaves the band. So at this point in Our Lady Peace, only Rain Maida, only the lead singer, is a founding member. But they're still Our Lady Peace. Now you have your singer and songwriter, like he is creatively the biggest voice in the band, but you're not even close to having like any other founding members. And I don't see this happening, but if he left the band and they replaced him and called themselves Our Lady Peace, they wouldn't be Our Lady Peace, even if they called him that. Even if they released an album though that said Our Lady Peace, like what is that?
It wouldn't be. Like Foreigner's like that. Like, you know, your only original member is now a special guest. It's like, okay, cool. He's like on his way out the door, and it's like, all right, you're watching a cover band for the rest of it. Now, like I said, for classic rock bands, especially ones where the guys are starting to die, that's not that uncommon. The one I was thinking of was 9 Inch Nails, where, like, if Trent Reznor is there, it's 9 Inch Nails, right? Like,
yeah.
It's his band, basically. Like, there's longtime collaborators. I know Atticus Ross, but he's only been there since, like, 2016. He's not an original member, and that's just the guy he does all the film stuff with. But there's obviously people that have been, like, involved with it for a long time, and there's people that are, like, have appeared, like, over albums. They've been in parts of, like, the live band for a long time, but, like, 9 Inch Nails is Trent Reznor's band, and it's basically he's doing whatever he wants with it. The other one that comes to mind, similar vein to that, would be King Crimson. Like King Crimson, I don't think it exists now, technically, but that was Robert Fripp's band, essentially. Whoever Robert Fripp wanted in King Crimson was King Crimson. Now that led to a lot of carryover between different members. Like King Crimson has a circle, it's like a revolving door of people in the 60s into the 70s. They released like 6 albums, and almost all of them sound completely different. They just like, there's one that's like very progressive, there's one that's very like pretty hard, almost heavy metal, there's hard rock, there's jazz, there's all sorts of different stuff. As he was cycling the musicians, the style of music just changed. And then in the 80s, he gets a bit more, he completely revamps the lineup, brings the drummer from the last drummer from the 70s back, redoes the whole lineup again. They release a bunch of albums. And then in the 90s, he brings all 4 of those guys back, plus 2 other guys. And then throughout the year, 2 of the guys from the 80s leave, but the guys that were there in the 90s stay. And then he revamps it completely in like 2013, 2014, and brings back guys that were in the band back in the 70s. And then including, again, new people. So it's this thing where there are bands where I would say that as long as a key person is there, it's kind of their band. So like they can kind of do whatever they want with it.
You know what's funny about this is like it almost depends on what they call themselves. Like Rob Zombie is a band. Like there's 4 to 5 people make, you know, it's a band called Rob Zombie, but it's named for the lead singer. I've seen Rob live a couple times. It's awesome. I go to any show, and all I care about is that Rob Zombie is there.
Alice Cooper, great example.
He's changed. Every other member of that band has changed, and I don't care. I guess just because it's called Rob Zombie. Like if it was still the White Zombie name, maybe I'd be more picky about this. Yeah. But the fact that he just calls it Rob Zombie, and I'm like, oh, okay. I don't care as long as it's you there. I don't know why is it really just the name that makes me feel weird about this whole thing with Fuel,
Well, I think
Any
it
of the
also
other
kinda
examples
depends
that
on
we've
just
given?
what it is. Like Rob Zombie is a band only in the sense that when Rob Zombie records an album, he needs a band to do it. But Rob Zombie is the driving force. He's the guy doing it. Same with like Trent Reznor with Nine Inch Nails, or like I mentioned Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper is the guy. But like you take this even to a more logical extension. You take somebody like a crooner, like a Wayne Newton or a Barry Manilow. Like they release albums all the time, but like no one's like, hey, who's in Barry Manilow's band? Like nobody cares.
Yeah.
Like when you go to see Barry Manilow, you're going to see Barry Manilow. So what I'm saying is that Barry Manilow and Rob Zombie are the same.
Well, like pop music is a great example. Like I really like Kesha's music. Friend of the show, my wife has really turned me on to Kesha, but like I don't care who's playing those instruments. Like I don't care. Like Justin Timberlake or whoever. These pop artists. Like no one cares about the musicians. It's a thing where
like it all depends on what it is. But like a singer, specifically like a famous singer, could have an army of musicians and an army of songwriters at their disposal, whereas a band bands tend to be something where it's viewed as a sum of its parts. Like the reason it's successful or the reason it's this big thing is because there is a collaborative force that is creating this. And obviously with bands, you have bands that have members that are important, you have members that are less important, you have bands that lineups change. That's why you get the difference between like original lineup versus classic lineup. Like David Gilmour is seen as the classic lead vocalist and lead guitarist for Pink Floyd, but he was not the original lead guitarist or lead vocalist for Pink Floyd.
AC/DC is another good example.
Great example. AC/DC is probably a great example of a high-profile change of a prominent member and arguably being successful and then somehow using that to become more successful. Yeah. It's often that like you'll replace a band member and then you like become successful when you weren't before, or you were successful before and then you kind of fall off. To have that like step up to be like, oh, we were famous and then we became more famous after that. It's
pretty rare.
It's a pretty unique thing as well. But I don't know, man. What is a band? I don't know. Why is a band?
Well, I mean, we covered a lot of ground here. Feel free to weigh in our Discord your thoughts.
Maybe there's an answer somewhere.
I think you did answer. So I think if I could summarize your answer, what is a band? Your answer is, well, it's the original band if it has 50% of the original lineup. That's your rule, and except for when it's not your rule. Is that about right? Is that your answer?
Yeah.
It's that except for when it's not. I mean,
it's the rule until there's an exception, and turns out there's lots of exceptions. But
if I go see the Wallflowers, all I care about is that Jacob Dylan is there. Like, right. I don't know why that's different than another band I've listened. I don't know.
Like Primus right now is a great example. Like Primus just got a new drummer, but there's a bit of a precedent for that because Primus has replaced the drummer before, and like Tim Alexander is the classic Primus drummer. He's the guy that was kind of on all the classic albums. Jay Lane was the guy with him before, but then it was Tim Alexander for a really, really long time. And then Tim Alexander kind of has quit the band several times. They got Brian Mantilla, Brain, who was in a bunch of different bands for a while. He was with them for stuff like the Brown album and a couple of others in the late 90s. And then eventually Tim Alexander comes back. And then Tim Alexander leaves again, and they bring in Jay Lane, who was the original drummer, back before he was with the band. And then Tim Alexander just left again, and they actually literally just did they called it the Interstellar Derby of drummer tryouts to just see who's the new drummer for Primus going to be. So with Primus, they've created the rule of like, as long as it's Les Claypool and the lead guitarist's name, who is completely escaping me right now, Larry Lalonde. As long as those two are there, it's Primus. By having been the drummer by bringing in other drummers before, you've created the mentality that, okay, the drummer missing is not the end of Primus.
Yeah, it's like if you see Spinal Tap, who cares who the drummer is, but Nigel better be playing guitar, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, a band like The Police, where it's Stuart Copeland and Andy Summers and Sting, you can't be The Police without all three of them. Like, the band has only ever been the three of them. If you were going to do it without them, you would have needed to do it without them sometime before. So now Sting just puts together his own bands and goes and plays Police songs. But it turns out it's a highly unique situation that kind of depends on the scenario. So,
well, that was thorough. Come back next week for some more Nic Cage a month. If you want to see the lineup, pop into the Discord. I've plugged it like 10 times episode already, so why haven't you done so? Do it. Join us. and join the community, hang out, talk about all this fun stuff, help us decide future months, and until next time, until next week, until our next Nic Cage episode, just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm the Biggie Boy and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. Follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.